open to anyone, all around the world.
What? Are you kidding me?
The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
Whoa!
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
You don't just do this to Shakhriyar in a critical game, except Alexei Sarana just did. Gorgeous chess. He makes his way into the round of 16.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
What a move! Duda moves on to the round of 16.
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 32. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 2022 Chess.com Global Championship, an action-packed morning. And we are here to cover the afternoon shift. We have 3 unforgettable matches for you. I'm your host, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Alongside me today, the one and only Grandmaster Aman Hambleton. Aman, good afternoon to you. 3 amazing matches on the docket. What more could we ask for?
Hey, Dania. Hello to everybody watching. I'm very excited to get into this commentary today. You called it. We have 3 super exciting matchups. And, I mean, when you think of names like Hikaru Nakamura, Nepomniachtchi, Aronian, I mean, these names on their own are enough to be mouthwatering, but check out their opponents as well. As the competition narrows, Dania, I mean, every match just becomes so competitive. And although we have favorites, we don't have anything close to guarantees.
Absolutely not. It narrows, it Nepos, it Svidlers. Nobody has had an easy go of it thus far in the round of 64. Not Hikaru Nakamura, not Aronian, and now their paths to Toronto become even more difficult. Hikaru faces David Navara, incredibly strong grandmaster from the Czech Republic. It's Nepo against Svidler, and Aronian faces multiple-time RCC weekend winner Maxim Matlakov, and a perennial super grandmaster, incredibly solid player. Let's go through these matches one by one, starting, of course, with the Nepo Svidler match. Nepomniachtchi is on fire. Whatever he touches on the chessboard turns to gold right now.
Yeah, no, Nepo is having, obviously, a high point in his career, that's for sure. He recently has been absolutely dominant, and he's up against Svidler, who I think is that wild card for everybody. Everyone knows just how talented Peter is, but he's been doing, I think Peter at this point is just one of those players that nobody wants to necessarily match up against because they know how strong he is, but he's that little bit of a wild card. So I think Peter Svidler is a player that has that 2750 plus ability that he just he plays so casually, so effortlessly, and I think he's a really scary opponent for someone like Nepo, who is in great form at the moment.
Without question. That's like seeing Michael Jordan in the park. He might be, 55 years old. He hasn't played in the NBA for 20 years. Peter has been struggling. It's no secret. He didn't do great in the Fisher Random tournament. He hasn't done as well in his last few over-the-board tournaments, but he still has the Super Grandmaster pedigree. He's won the Russian Super Final many times. You don't do any of that by accident. It's going to be a tough match for Nepo. And, of course, it's going to be a tough match also for Hikaru Nakamura, David Navara, a name that I think most people in the chat have probably at the very least heard of. One of the nicest people in the entire chess world, a class act, but also a fearsome chess player who's been in and out of the 2700 club for the better part of 2 decades, Aman.
Yeah, absolutely. David Navara, we remember his last match against Michael Adams. I don't think I've ever seen an Armageddon be so one-sided as he took that match down effortlessly with the black pieces as well. So David Navara, he has that demeanor, like he's such a great, nice guy. And, well, he is, but he's also willing to stick it to you on the chessboard as well. Hikaru Nakamura, a clear favorite here, Dania. But when it comes to Navara's style, he can absolutely, I mean, he's a quick player. He trusts himself. He has his theory. He generally knows his game plan going in. So he trusts himself and he can play quickly and he can keep up with Hikaru on the clock. Now, as for the moves, that remains to be seen. Hikaru's definitely the favorite, but don't sleep on this match, as Hikaru did not have a walkthrough in his last match.
No. Very far from it, actually. I mean, it was a tie match after game one. He could have lost game one against the Chilean Grandmaster Rodrigo Vasquez. So Hikaru isn't going into this tournament thinking that, Toronto is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed in the CGC. That's why we're watching. And that is also why we'll be watching the final of today's matches. Levon Aronian, last but not least, faces off against Maxim Matlakov. Aronian has been all over the place, Aman. He's been playing everywhere, online, over the board, everything you could put, rapid, classical, blindfold, Fischer, random. I mean, he has had his fingerprints over all of the top tournaments. He's 39 years old. Levon no longer a spring chicken, but he still plays like he's in his teens. He still has that vibrancy, that flamboyancy to his style. So, Maxime is going to have to bring the kind of form that enabled him to win some of the RCC weekenders. Otherwise, you've got no chance against an in-form Levon.
Yeah, absolutely. Levon Aronian, I feel, is definitely surging right now when it comes to his chess. He's always been at the top. I mean, he's a player that, if we look back on his chess career, he was well into the 2,800 category, like one of the highest rated players in the world. So Levon has really been up and down, but always been in that top 10 of chess. You say the name Levon Aronian, and he's right there. Matlakov, on the other hand, is a name that might not be as familiar, but of course, for players that are familiar with the Russian Higher League and these kind of really serious tournaments, and of course the Chess.com rapid events as well. I mean, he's definitely a player that I don't think Aronian is going to feel as an easy pairing or anything. So I actually think that for all these matches, this match that we just talked about might actually be one of the closest ones, and I certainly think it'll go to Armageddon.
Absolutely. And we will be starting with Hikaru Nakamura. We will take a look at the community predictions shortly. But first, let's take a look at the overall bracket. All 64 players, 32 invites, and 32 qualifiers are here. A lot of them are out. A lot of them are in amazing form. We've seen some incredible displays thus far. Lenier Dominguez. Yesterday, Alexei Sarana put together a phenomenal match to defeat Shakir Mamedyarov. I feel like I'm looking at the intro to Game of Thrones, where we see a map of the whole kingdom, and there's the Nakamura kingdom over on the top left, and Jeffrey Zhang over in the bottom left. And as we zoom into the brackets, the individual kingdoms and nations, we have sub storylines on that sort of headline each individual bracket. This bracket, of course, features Hikaru Nakamura. He is the one who has the X on his back, and who Lenier Dominguez is likeliest, but not guaranteed, to face in the round of 16.
Right, as we have the brackets really start to shape up, as there's only a couple more spots to be filled, 4 to be exact, and one of them is right here, Hikaru Nakamura against David Navara. It could be the All-American matchup coming up next, and actually I think most number 1 seeds are actually advancing from what we've seen in their respective groups, and another one of those is Jan Nepomniachtchi, who made short work in the past, but now comes up against Peter Svidler, who's a lot more of a formidable opponent than previously. But I just think Daniel, the form and the way that Nepo is playing right now is it's too consistent.
Yeah, nobody has been able to stop him. I mean, anything anybody throws at him just fails miserably. I mean, his opening preparation has been impeccable. He has, honestly, he's changed his style. He's changed his opening repertoire, and all of it has been for the better. And finally, today we'll be contesting also the H bracket with Levon Aronian against Maxim Matlakov to determine who will be facing the, talk about on form, a Sam Sevian who defeated Rasmus Svein and then who defeated MVL also in an Armageddon and also in an absolutely crushing display. So these are the 3 brackets that we will be contesting today. And finally, before we jump into the games, let's take a look at the community predictions. Come on, we got some lopsided predictions here. Where's the David Navara fan club?
Yeah, it's well, there's 103 of them. That basically sums up what you guys think about these matchups. And well, maybe these are a little bit lopsided, Dania, but you have to say, Hikaru Nakamura, Jan Nepomniachtchi, and Levon Aronian, three clear favorites going into today. I didn't expect that it would be that much, honestly. We're the Peter Svidler fans. Like, I guess Nepo has won a lot of people over lately.
He really has 96-4, and I think these predictions are fair, but obviously that is the nature of an upset. You don't think it's possible until it happens. Yep. And so far, the community has been pretty accurate in predicting the results of the matches. We've definitely had our share of upsets. I mean, obviously, Sevi and MVL, Grishuk is out. So, yep. It's in the air. It's no question that it's in the air, and it's incredibly important for the favorites, Amon, to start with a win in game one. Remember that it is a 4-game match with a time control of 15+2. Seatbelts fastened, everybody. We are about to begin. I think we will start with Hikaru Nakamura, and then the next matches will start a couple of minutes after that. Hikaru, he has to get off to a better start, Amon, than he did against Rodrigo Vasquez, because David Navara is going to punish him.
Yeah, that's the thing. For those that remember the last Hikaru Nakamura match that Dania and myself called in this Chess.com Global Championship, I don't think Hikaru can be that careless, and I think the person who knows that most of all is Hikaru Nakamura. He probably didn't feel great about that match, especially the way it started. He could have been in more serious trouble, and a guy like David Navara, if he gets an opportunity, he knows what's at stake here. He knows how good Hikaru is, and if you keep giving the chances to your opponents, small mistakes, a guy like David Navara, he's going to pounce on it.
And the game has started, and already a change from Hikaru Nakamura in comparison to game one against Vasquez. He basically goes for a main line here. He goes for a main line Nimzo Indian, E3 and Bishop D2, which is a rather fashionable line that we have seen in high-level chess recently. So I feel like David Navara must have been expecting what Hikaru has been doing almost exclusively online, knight F3, B3, G3. Yep. And here we see sort of the Nakamura of old going for principled 1d4 variations.
Yep. And, when we say that people have prep, when we use that word, that term, there's a few different kinds of preparation that a player can have. This, for example, what Hikaru's played, this isn't what I would call dangerous prep. This isn't something where David Navara has to worry about being worse in a couple moves or, going down a rabbit hole where Hikaru is going to have this crazy computer line. This kind of prep is just, I generally know what kind of positions I'm getting into. You're probably going to be less familiar. From Hikaru's perspective, he's going to be more comfortable. He's going to know the plans, where the pieces go. And it's an offbeat line, less common than, what is played generally lately. And, it's a trendy line, so it's still developing. Not everything is figured out yet. And I tell you, Dania, if you look at what's on the board right now, if I was seeing a student of mine playing this in a tournament, I might say E3, Bishop D2. What are you doing, man? You're blocking in your bishop. This looks like beginner stuff, but actually it's very high level.
Yeah, go learn a proper line of the Nimzo. But a couple of years ago, I know my friend Sam Shankland started playing. He played it against me, and it's hard to take it seriously. The bishop on D2 kind of looks awkward, but the main point of this move is that in the Nimzo, you frequently see black capturing on C3. And here, white does not want to ruin his pawn structure. White wants to recapture with the bishop. And what David Navara was thinking about is which setup he wants to adopt. Like you're saying, Amon, this isn't about figuring out how to equalize. It's about figuring out which type of position David Navara wants with the black pieces. He goes for C5. Now you could continue striking at the center with D5, or the line that a lot of top grandmasters choose is to fianchetto the light squared bishop on B7 and still ultimately end up trading off the dark squared bishop in order to increase black's control of the E4 square.
Yep. And you wonder why sometimes people spend time in the opening. It's like, how many moves could I play here as black and they would be basically decent or good moves? I could think of probably more than 6 or 7 that are all fine for black. Completely fine. E6, D5, B6, knight C6, rook E8, the list goes on and on. So really, I think Navara is, as you're saying, trying to select which line he wants to play. And of course, you have to make that decision early, Daniel. You can't just make one move and then decide later. It's like, no, the way you commit your pawns and pieces now affects your setup for the whole game.
It totally does. And there's that b6 move by David Navara. I'm expecting Hikaru to develop his light squared bishop to d3. A3 is also a trigger, kind of a lever that white can pull whenever he wants to pull it, but there's generally no rush to play A3. And with the pawn on c5, I have seen players drop the bishop back to A5 because B4 does not trap the bishop. That square is controlled by black's pawn. So David will have the option of keeping his keeping his dark squared bishop alive.
Yeah, it's a nice
here we go.
Flexible option, bishop a5, but of course, as we talk about it, why would it happen? Bishop takes c3, and we see the entire point of bishop d2 come to fruition. Now the bishop's on c3, and you have to wonder, like, how quickly does David Navara want to deal with this bishop? Sometimes you go for a slower setup, d6, knight bd7, or knight c6, or you can try to force things right away with the move knight e4. So you take on c3, give up the bishop pair, but then you're making a claim that, well, actually, I'm going to get it right back.
Well, if you can take on c3, play d6, knight d7, and knight f6, you've equalized completely beyond a shadow of doubt. The problem is that takes a while, and white could actually cause some problems on black's king side. A move like queen c2 is not out of the question, and one variation that black already has to calculate, not saying that this is what Hikaru is going to go for, is queen c2, knight takes c3, bishop takes h7, and then b takes c3. You might say, well, I trapped the bishop, but you have to evaluate the bishop sack on g6. This doesn't happen to be good for white, but you can't just wave your hands around and say, I'm going to make these 5 moves and I'm going to equalize. It is a pretty concrete position, and the eval bar seems to believe that Hikaru has a pretty sizable advantage, and this is exactly how you get it. Queen d6.
And I was going to say, like, the way that white has played this opening, it definitely feels like Hikaru prepped that. Like, this is a well-known line. The way that Navara played it is not, weird at all. So I feel like he totally expected this. So it's interesting that he's probably well within his preparation.
And we'll get to the Nepo game, which just started, but there's a big problem here. If black tries to defend the c5 pawn, then white's queen actually drops back to e5, forking the bishop and the g7 pawn.
Nasty.
So David Navara might already be in trouble. And guess what, Amon? Hikaru found a way to punish him for delaying his queenside development. Queen d6 is a really scary move, and I think black is just either losing a pawn or he has to open the g file, which is kind of out of the question.
Yeah.
So David Navara already facing opening problems. We will leave him to them. Let's catch the start of the Jan Nepomniachtchi Peter Svidler game. I'm very excited to see what openings they are going to bring to the table.
Yeah, this match getting underway. Very, very curious myself, and we actually have. So is it? Nepo has the white pieces to start off here. E4, very standard for these top guys lately, and you can see the sort of slow pace to the game so far by Peter. And this is one thing that I expected, Dania. I'll be paying attention to in this match. Nepo is so dang fast. Like, he just doesn't slow down, even when he should. Even when it's like very complicated. Hey, maybe take a minute or two to evaluate. Nope. He's lightning quick, and Peter is a little more measured, tempered. He takes his time.
And Peter is one of the foremost specialists in the Marshall gamut. Nobody plays into the Marshall anymore. What I'm talking about is the move c3, which used to be the main move at one moment. Yeah. But the Marshall, according to sort of the modern consensus, just basically equalizes. There's not much to discuss. And so players have been going with these anti-Marshall approaches, a4. They've been throwing in d3. And this position has been hotly disputed in top-level chess now for well over a decade.
Yeah, this is, it's so interesting to see how theory develops in chess, because it's like, how could the evaluation of something change so drastically that the Marshall used to be like, maybe, what is this move? C3, white goes for d4. All of a sudden, black comes in with the Marshall, and suddenly we've got to a point where nobody even wants to deal with it. So they're playing all these anti-Marshall moves. A4 is one of them. H3 is another one. And as we see in the game here, that's exactly what's happened. I still can't get over the fact that Nepo is sitting there. Remember, there's only +2 increment on these games, and look at Nepo's clock.
He's already up 2 minutes. Right? We're still deep within theory. And this is what really concerns me, Amon, about Peter Svidler. We saw the Wesley So Vasily Ivanchuk match, right? We saw Ivanchuk holding his own on the board, but just getting into epic trouble on the clock every game. I'm a little bit worried that we might see a similar narrative and storyline in this match. So let's keep an eye on Peter Svidler's clock. He's got to make these opening decisions crisply to leave himself with enough time to deal with Nepo's, devilish middle game style, because Nepo's going to be causing you problems on every move.
Absolutely. I wanted to.
The guy is playing a bullet game.
I wanted to talk about that A5 move for a sec, because it might look a little weird for White to just, I don't know, commit so much at the beginning of the game to just pushing this A pawn. For what? Why don't we play D3, D4? But if you go to the position, if he moves back before White played A5, then I think if you just put D3, knight A5 or something, maybe D6 and then knight A5 on the board. Black wants to use that square for maybe their knight, and the bishop on B3 can feel a little awkward. And there's a lot of cases, like horror stories, where the bishop goes to A2, and exactly, you're showing it. Something like
we are on the
B3,
same page here, partner.
pawn takes C5, Black brings that knight back to C6, and the bishop on A2, once dominating the light squares, dominating the board, is now reduced to total passivity.
A pile of just a dumpster fire here on A2. So you often see White just desperate, just anything to open up the diagonal for my bishop.
Let me breathe.
I'll give as many pawns as you want. But you're exactly right. And so A5 fixes, stops knight A5, and also it fixes weaknesses on the queen side. It's a double-sided coin. Yes, A5 needs to be defended, but so does A6. You can see Svidler there giving away the A6 pawn, but winning A5 in return. So my guess is that Nepo is going to strike at the center with D4, but he's going to wait for Black's knight to move away from C6. Okay, so we have another game. We have the Levon Aronian Maxim Matlakov game. Shall we take a gander at that one?
Yeah, let's catch the opening phase of that game as well, see how things started out here, as I already see a position that, well, it looks like it has a serious likelihood of just neutralizing completely. Ooh. That's my first impression as I get here, Daniel.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to spend too long on this one. Levon played a pretty creative opening. He played a bishop's opening, but at the end of the day, Maxime, he played this E4 move, exploiting a pretty simple tactic. D4, knight E4, knight E4, bishop takes B3. Everything is getting captured and traded. And after rook takes C4, we get a bishop versus knight situation. But in this case, I'm on with the center as wide open as it is. I don't think that either side's minor piece is appreciably better. I think this is dead equal. And, I'm going to assign this an 80% likelihood of a first round draw, which would be a great result, by the way, for Maxime to hold Levon so confidently with the black pieces.
Absolutely. If you want to pull up an analysis board and just go back to the move E4, because if Levon
move
is
one
thinking...
or move 14?
Yeah, move 1, of course. Let's break down the whole tree here. Yeah, this move right here, if you're Levon and you're thinking, okay, he can clearly calculate this DE line, he sees the full liquidation. If he wants a little bit more from this game, you might think about the move D4, trying to keep the pawns together. And I think the idea was like knight A5, maybe to try to get on these light squares here, the C4 square. And it's just an interesting standoff between these two bishops on B3 and E6. Nobody wants to take the other one. So Black's maybe even going to play bishop D5, just once again, tempt you to take. But I think this is a position that was just well calculated by Matlakov. He didn't want, I think, to allow any position where the two bishops really breathe. So he neutralized everything, and he just liquidated the whole board with E4. And hey, he's playing with the black pieces against Aronian. You definitely take full equality in game one.
Yeah, and obviously the game is very far from over. Levon is going to try to orchestrate some shenanigans down the D file. He establishes his rook on D5, but I think Maxime, with no targets and no weaknesses in his position, should be able to hold a draw. Let's go back to the Hikaru game. I know a lot of fans, a lot of players eager to watch Hikaru try to dismantle David Navara, and we already have a very interesting position in game one. Nimzo Indian, Hikaru resolving the central tension to his favor and he stands much, much better here. Oh my God, David Navara ended up taking on f3, Aman, to preserve the pawn on c5. But look at this pressure on g7. Look at that bishop sniping away at Black's kingside. There is nobody worse than Hikaru to have this position against.
Yeah, it really couldn't be. If you also look at the knight coming into c6, like if white even takes the time to play f4, that knight just doesn't go anywhere. You know, b4, d4, e5, all covered. White's just going to go long castle, and if things weren't going well enough, long castling for white also threatens rook takes d7 when the knight moves. So we're castling maybe with tempo, then we're going rook g3, and then it's either other rook to g1, pressure on g7, or rook to h3, and the h-pawn is loose. So I just don't see Black surviving here. What are the defensive resources?
Yeah, you could see Black losing this in like 2 seconds. e5 by David. Ugh. I mean, yeah, I get that it closes down the bishop, but look at the gaping holes that it creates in the center. You pointed out the move f4, and now this move could serve to open the bishop back up. In fact, if Hikaru plays f4 now,
could we just take it?
Well, you take on f4?
On e5. Because I'm looking for like the same kind of.
Whoa.
I'm wondering like how.
Oh, let me show. So the point is, after ef, you play queen d5, picking up the rook in the corner. So Aman is proposing bishop e5, and Hikaru has played e4. But this was a fascinating idea, attacking g7 and threatening a fork on d5. I guess Black has rook f7 though. No.
Right. No.
No.
Oh,
rook takes g7.
Oh.
What a tactic.
Beautiful.
This would have been an amazing mate, but there is a defense in this position, and it is g6. Oh, and after queen d5, you say, I'm winning the rook in the corner.
Right.
But if you calculate one move to the end, the queen is trapped.
Yep. Well, there you go. That's how I would lose the game with white.
Yeah, well, you saw the whole line and just testing my ability to spy defensive resources. And Hikaru has indeed played the move f4. This game, Aman, might not last much longer. This
I really
is a
don't
disaster.
think it will.
This is a disaster.
You also look at the time, Danya, and it's like, okay, great, you're being attacked. This isn't even a blitz game. Hikaru Nakamura has 7 minutes to try to like orchestrate the right attack. That is so much. It's really an eternity when it's defensive positions.
No, when you're playing against Hikaru, you're at this point you're not even looking at his clock. He's got time to calculate anything he wants to calculate. How is the game likely to go? E takes f4 is not possible. d6 by Navara to defend the pawn on e5. It's now +5.
I mean,
and I think Hikaru's just going to castle.
Yeah, something as simple as castling.
And after knight d7, just to show you how winning this is, Aman, even if you go queen g4, rook f7, and queen e6, forget the g7 pawn, forget checkmate. Positionally, Black is busted as well. Yeah, it's not a case where you've sacrificed something for this. Black is going to be the one down material.
Yeah, and it's going to be the kind of game where the engine's going to say, oh, it's +5, and the material could still be equal. Like, that's how bad the position is.
No, every move I look at for Black just loses the pawn on d6 or loses the pawn on g7, and you get mated. Not to mention, let alone the ideas of f takes e5 and then pushing the other pawn to f4 to clear the diagonal. No, this is over. I mean, this is basically resignable for Black.
Yeah, I think you make a few moves, try to get your knight into the game, but once you realize that you're lost, even with your knight in the game, that's when I think the towel starts to be consider throwing that one in.
You know, it's so rare in these lines when the knight lands on e4. If we rewind just for a second, how did all of this happen to David Navara? When he played the move knight e4, he was not expecting Hikaru to give away what is often the greatest asset for white in the position. But Nakamura just sniffs these resources out so quickly, and he finds them 100% of the time. After queen d6, the situation was already pretty dire for Black. And, it's on the board. Well, the line that I just showed.
That's it's a really nice line because it shows that you're not in any rush. You're not, frantically trying to play f takes e5, pawn f4. You're not trying to play rook g3, rook g1. You're just playing with the queen and showing how one piece can just dominate a position. And Hikaru takes that d pawn, and his advantage is only increasing.
Why not? I mean, f6 is going to be hanging. Look at that pawn on c5. It's a total sitting duck. And once Hikaru wins this pawn, he's going to have a 3-on-1 on the queen side. I mean, I've seen crazier things happen. Hikaru isn't flawless in his conversion.
Yeah.
But I don't think I have ever seen him, screwing up a position like this with 6.5 minutes on his clock.
Yeah, I just think that's not. This isn't the part of the game where Hikaru is going to be making a bunch of mistakes. The conversion phase for him, especially after, like, he chose to go for this. It wasn't just how things worked out, which sometimes is the case. It's just the best line happens to trade your queens when you're attacking. But he chose to go for this, which means he's comfortable with it. He can already see the variations. And, I mean, if this knight doesn't go to, maybe 97 or 95, but f6 is hanging, right? With the rook on g1, white can just seriously think about taking on f6.
White absolutely could think about taking on f6. Maybe knight f4 is the way to muddy the waters. I think Hikaru's going to miss the fork on e2.
Yeah,
there's a
that'll
pretty
be how
high
the game ends.
chance of that.
Yeah.
Fat chance of that. But knight f4, rook e1 is game over. No, this is barring some sort of a miracle or a blunder. As resilient as David Navara is, and he is an unbelievably resilient defender. I mean, we're talking about Hikaru here. This one is all but in the bag. In the meantime, we have a lot of transformations in the Jan Nepomniachtchi Peter Svidler game. So let's pan out to that one and update y'all on what's going on there. Wow. No more rooks, Aman. Who needs rooks?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really interesting development. Very interesting structure, because bishop on g2 is definitely a great piece. But when it comes to, like, which structure do I prefer? At its core, probably I prefer Peter Svidler with the black pieces, but it's the way the white pieces are organized that is just a little bit better than black's. The bishop on g2 strikes the d5 pawn, the knight on a5 feels a little aimless, and the knight on d4 is so well situated. White's queen, by the way, hasn't joined the action yet. Queen d2, queen a1. If that queen gets involved in any way, all of a sudden the knight starts looking silly. You got to move that piece around, and I could definitely see the pawn. Once the pawn on d5 falls, you're very concerned as black. So you got to hold on to that pawn for dear life, and maybe try to play on the dark squares. White's light square pawns on the king side, Danya, that might be the difference. If Peter can somehow arrange his queen, and maybe like queen e5 as you're highlighting, knight b7, knight d6, just reroute the pieces. That might be what he needs to go for. So very double-edged game right now, and I don't think the engine is preferring one side or the other too much. It's just one of those positions where may the better player win.
Yeah, the engine just says, I abstain. I don't want to pick any sides here. I'm going to stay
Exactly.
unbiased.
Yep.
But it is equal. I think if I really like the look of queen e5, I think Peter has to play it quickly. He's down to 5.5 minutes. Nepo, of course, has hours left on his clock. He's got 11 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah.
Which is totally typical. Nepo could consider the move c3 as a way of anchoring in the knight on d4, but that creates another permanent weakness. So maybe he should refrain from pushing any of his pawns and instead focus, as you were suggesting, on activating his queen, putting it, let's say, on d2. But your point is well taken. This is not just a dead draw. And I think the pressure is on Peter, given that he is the one down 5 minutes. But queen e5 is on the board, and Mr. Svidler seems to be up to the task. Wait, Nepo already played queen d2. He had basically pre-moved it.
Yeah, he pretty much did. And I think at this point where there's so few options on the board, Nepo is one of the best players in the whole world, I think, at like thinking on his opponent's time, because he already barely spends his own time. So I actually think if you pull up some stat, like Nepo might do most of the thinking in his game, not on his clock, which is like a funny thing to think about. But hey, when Svidler is the one using all the time, Nepo's sitting there, he's calculating, and that's exactly what the strong players do to put you under time pressure. When you're busy spending 5 minutes thinking, they're evaluating what move are you probably going to play? What's the best move? What's on your mind? What's the practical chance? And he's got to move ready for it. That's the worst feeling in chess, Daniel. When you spend so much time and you're like, oh yeah, this is an absolute, wicked move. I know I got everything worked out. The way he saw this. Yeah.
He sees every. That's where I started tilting. He sees everything. This guy's a machine. And so many people have said that of Nepo. I'm considering the interesting resource B3 by Black, trying to exploit the fact that the queen is anchored to the knight. So after b3, I actually think b3 is a really strong move, because if white plays c3, your maneuver, knight b7, knight c5, knight d3, could end up being quite scary. And of course, if white takes on a5, black takes on d4. And again, here white is actually in trouble because these pawns on the queen side are incredibly weak. So I think after b3, if anybody has to be careful, it might be Nepo. But Peter Svidler is taking eternities, oceans of time on every move here. And in the blink of an eye, he is down to 3 minutes. And Aman, he's going to start getting nervous if he drops below a minute. Peter isn't totally what he used to be in terms of his time scrambling ability. And he has to keep a little bit of a buffer zone, even if his position is good. He has decided on the move c3.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you're not leaving many options. So, as I was about to say, you're going to see the reply very quickly here from Nepo, because he doesn't have many things to consider. Knight c4 is the move. Often the difference, Dania, between two really, really strong players, especially in a situation like this, it is the time. Right? I just see two legends playing in front of me, and it's like, okay, what's going to be the difference between them? Well, if one of the guys can play to this position 7 minutes faster than the other, that's a difference, and that has to be seriously considered as one of Nepo's biggest assets. That he puts his opponents, his very strong opponents, under time pressure, and then of course everyone's going to play moves that are a little bit subpar for their standard when you're under time pressure.
He just did the classic Nepo, like shaking his head from side to side. Look, okay, maybe here, maybe there. And the sort of, Michaela Moroni not impressed face. I would imagine that he's not too impressed with his own play here. I think Peter did a great job of solving all the opening problems. The big question in this game, will his 6.5 minute time advantage make its presence felt as we move on to the end game stage of this game? In the meantime, I think Levon's game is still pretty balanced, but Hikaru is about to win David Navara's knight, so perhaps we should catch the end of that game.
Yeah.
Let's move back to, or maybe not. Maybe it's not as simple as I thought it was.
What's going on here? H3 is definitely, that's Hikaru sniffing out the possibility of winning this knight, though. You don't, you don't play H3 unless that's on your mind.
I smell knight, but what exactly is he going to do when knight takes h3?
Is it just rook f1?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is rook f1, isn't it?
And then
the other
e3.
rook. Yeah. And look at that pawn on f4, restricting the knight from
that's pretty nasty.
Retreating to g5. Does black have... No, here black has nothing to do, but somehow the eval bar seems to believe that perhaps black can magically extricate the knight.
Like maybe king f8 or something. I feel like maybe we need a rook somehow getting involved, because the h-pawn is going to do nothing for you.
And now it's up to +4. And the problem is that in addition, Aman, to rook e2, bishop e3 and bishop takes c5, nobody canceled the idea of just winning all of black's pawns. So rook b8 by David. And
it's the lateral defense, right? Somehow getting rook b3 to save the knight on h3.
Yeah, the rook comes swooping in to the rescue. But I think even bishop e3 here is completely winning. Bishop e3, you might say, oh, but this lets the knight escape back to e4. Well, yeah, it does. But after rook e6, you lose the c5 pawn. And like I had said earlier, the 3-on-1 is going to be totally decisive. So I think Hikaru's got his choice of winning lines here.
There's something about, my brain really just doesn't feel comfortable allowing knight e4, knight g3, and knight takes f5. That's the one pawn that I can't defend. So I would be a little more attached to somehow trapping this knight, and it seems like, at least with this move, he's leaning towards that. But wow, look at this move, knight to h1.
Slippery piece. And Aman, you called it. Bishop e1, the idea is rook b3 to pave the way for the knight's escape back to g3. And Hikaru is only up a quote-unquote only up a pawn right now. So if he doesn't win the knight, he's kind of put all of his eggs in one basket.
Right. The one thing that is a little bit forcing is that with bishop e1, so let's say you start with rook d3 first. Rook d3, then h4 is forced because you have to give the knight an anchor square. And bishop e1, and it seems like eventually the knight is going to get to g3, right? and you're going to take, and you are going to be up 2 pawns there without black having any inroads into the position. I gotta say, this does look fairly convincing as well.
Yeah.
So I think this is a nice option. If you're getting nervous as Hikaru, like, oh, I thought I was trapping that knight, and you're starting to second guess, it's nice to know that this is available.
Yeah, he's down in 2 minutes, so what I wouldn't do is take, another minute and a half to try to figure out how to trap the knight. And Hikaru is an incredibly practical decision maker. Speaking of which, this is exactly what he chooses: Rook D3 and Bishop E1. So depressing. David Navara raises his hands up. I got my knight out. Well,
Exactly.
Congratulations. You have a Rook endgame where you're down 2 pawns and you're down to a minute on the clock.
Yeah, some prize. Some
Exactly.
prize. So knight H1, the intentional knight H1, we know that knights are literally at their absolute worst in the corner because they only have 2 squares to move to. You talk about the scope of knights, why you don't place it on the side of the board, and certainly why you don't place it in the corner. He has to play knight G3, and yeah, I think this should be reasonably routine for Hikaru. Definitely, I think Navara, I think he's probably got his best position in a really long time, but that doesn't say much.
Yeah, no, David, hats off by all means to David for the resistance that he's put up here. The issue is that he was just too lost to begin with. This one's not totally over, though. I mean, you could see a scenario where black maybe gets the rook into H4. If David could get to Hikaru's pawns on the king side, then the situation starts to complicate.
That's right.
But he's not going to be able to do that because the rook on D7, for example, has to keep the E7 square under lock and key. Otherwise, White's rook is going to infiltrate the 7th rank, and that's a death sentence.
And I was actually thinking that Hikaru would have played like rook E to G2, perhaps on the previous move to try to lock down a rook on that G pawn. Because now with rook H8, if you need to defend G7 as black, you can move the rook up 1 square to H7. I think if my intuition is correct, they usually teach you to try to trade a pair of rooks here as white. Dealing with 2 rooks is a little bit annoying. There's a lot of threats that can be made. And as white, the rooks are a little superfluous. You're winning without the rooks on the board. So any reduction of pieces is simply going to take away counterplay for black and just make it easier for your pawns to push up the board.
That's totally true. And rook D2, to that end, should be seriously considered. The downside of playing rook D2 is that after the trade, black can go and pick up the F5 pawn, but perhaps that is a worthy price to pay to be able to play before. There's a rook trade. Hikaru gives up the H3 pawn, but look how smartly he's done that. Now the king is going to invade D5, and the game is basically over.
Yeah,
that was called. You got it.
That was really, really nicely done. So I think as Navara here, you're looking at maybe rook H2 and rook D2 to try to cut that king off. But Hikaru, I think he's going to bring the rook to the D file and make a bridge, so to speak. So
and the king is
great
cut off
execution.
Also.
Yeah,
no, this is over on the spot because the king is cut off. You'll never make it past the E file without trading rooks. And we know the pawn endgame is lost, so I think just BC and C6 is probably winning.
Well, there's the calculation. It's written on the ceiling, so he's just going to verify with it.
He takes C5, right where the smoke detector is.
And yeah, the rook just doesn't make it around in time. C7, king D5. And the worst part about this is that if there was no pawn on C4, Dania, and you're highlighting it, maybe you can dream of those 2 pawns making a difference on the king side. But as it stands,
it's going to be a little bit closer than people realize. Like rook F3, G5, then black's going to bring the king up, and then the pawns start to move really fast. But there's no way that black makes it in time. I think actually rook B3 might be the most precise move. But then rook C8. Hikaru with 30 seconds. He's got to be a little bit careful. Basically, the point here is that you want to buy yourself as many tempi as possible so that you can promote the other C pawn. But that takes some time as well. Rook B3 is on the board. Rook C8 forced. Otherwise, rook B8.
I think strangely that I would have gone for rook F3 just because the rook does really well in front of the pawns. You can never advance the pawns without the king, at least.
Yep. King D6. Oh, G4, he wants king E5, I think.
That's right.
Just
And
king e5 ends it. Nicely
king
done.
f6 needed to be tried by Navara, but then when you're wasting a king move as black, white just goes c5, and it's like 3 moves till white gets a queen.
Yeah, Levon, by the way, is going to draw his game. That was a completely colorless game all the way. But we need to flip to the Jan Nepomniachtchi Peter Svidler game because that continues to become more and more exciting. One game already in the books. Hikaru Nakamura scoring a victory in the first match game against Navara. Here is the Nepo Svidler position. I think Peter has acquitted himself tremendously despite his time pressure.
He has, and we see the time. It's come much closer to even here. 3 minutes, a minute and a half. Yeah, and after queen takes f7, both sides appear to have like perpetuals almost in the bag.
Yeah. Black has queen a1, and if bishop f1, there's knight d2, and then time for white to give the perpetual.
Yep.
Nepo has that. He's got that Michaela Moroni face again. He's not too impressed with his round one draw.
Yeah. Meh.
Okay, this is a decent result, but not amazing. Decent. And all of the games are now in the books because the Aronian game has finished at exactly the same time. That one was really a draw. We kind of could predict the result after 15 moves or so.
Yeah. That was a draw since the start.
That was a draw since the start. Let's review the scoreboard. 3 matches are in play. 3 first-round games are concluded. Only one of them is decisive. Hikaru Nakamura wins his round 1 game against David Navara. He has a 1-0 lead, and David will have his work cut out for him, as will the other 2 underdogs who have to continue playing in confident style. All right, we are going to go on a short break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we will be contesting Game 2 of today's afternoon round of 32 matches here at the CGC. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more action in just a couple of moments. A look at Hikaru Nakamura's iconic orange wall and the memorabilia behind him. This is a backdrop that we are all so familiar with. Hikaru Nakamura wins his first game here in the round of 32 against David Navara. I'm on a tour de force performance. Let's be real about that. David Navara basically had no chances in game one.
He didn't. He walked into definitely opening prep, and I actually find it a little ironic what I was saying. I guess what I meant was you're really not supposed to find bishop d2 as dangerous. You can lose the game in 10 moves prep, but it was exactly that. The position was over not 5 moves after bishop d2 was played. So pretty scary stuff. That's Hikaru's game 1 prep. What does he have in store with the black pieces, we now wonder.
Yeah, and I guess what does David Navara have in store for the white pieces, because he has some coming back to do. The other 2 matches between Nepo and Peter Svidler, Aronian Matlakov, ended in relatively placid draws. The Svidler-Nepo game was definitely had a lot more meat on the bone, let's put it that way, Aman. But Peter Svidler, total kudos to him. He held his own for that entire game. He did great.
He did. Fantastic by him. He'll be happy with that result. And in Aronian Matlakov, nothing much to say about that one. Not every single game is going to have complete dynamism and chances for both sides. That was just a well-played game by both. And again, when chess is played at the highest level, well, oftentimes it just looks like that.
It does indeed. And here we see a look at the players. Navara, he seems calm. He seems up to the challenge of coming back with the white pieces. The opening phase, Aman, is going to be critical. Hikaru Nakamura's Berlin, the way he plays against the Italian is basically unbreakable. If he has wanted to draw, he has made it essentially on demand. Let's see what David Navara has in store for us in this Italian.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, is Navara going to be thinking, which I think this is always, after a tough game one, you always have this moment with yourself. Do you take a bunch of risks, as this is your first game with the white pieces yourself, or are you comfortable with that draw? And I think David Navara, especially against someone like Hikaru, needs to push here. And the reason that I think that is also because of the nature of game number 1. That was only game number 1. Hikaru with the white pieces here, he's clearly showing that he's well prepped. He's got a bit of a different style, some different openings prepared specifically against Navara. And Hikaru's next game with white might be just as lethal and tough to deal with. So, if you're looking at a tough game coming up next, I think you have to make a statement in this one if you're David.
You absolutely do. I'm not going to say that drawing this loses you the match, but being down, a point going into the final 2 games, one of which you're going to have with the black pieces, like you said, given how game 1 went, he absolutely needs to try to step on the gas pedal here. And that's what he's doing. This is a good opening choice, right? The Italian is a pretty open-ended opening. There are no forced draws. There are no equivalents of the Berlin. And David Navara, he's got to play what he's comfortable with. And I think that's exactly the approach that he's trying to take. Now, Aman, the Italian isn't an opening that you play for an early opening advantage. You're not going for the quick knockout. You're going for a long-term positional struggle.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that a lot of chess openings, the very best ones, we even saw a good example. If you remember last game or last round, the game between Aronian and Matlakov, right? That's an example of a game that Navara does not want at all in this round. Mm-hmm. Something, that just liquidates quickly, where it's like easy ways to trade a lot of pieces, and especially open up the center so the rooks just get vacuumed off the board. So that game is a good example of what you don't want. And this game is the exact contrast, right? Now, all of a sudden, the center's not opened up yet. The pieces are still finding their homes. No immediate trades. The moves, a6 and a4 have been played to actually tuck those bishops back in on a7, on a2. That's specifically to avoid trades. H3 to avoid the pin. So just the nature, the way these moves are coming out, there's no pawn tension at the moment. No pawns are attacking one another, and piece trades are just hard to come by. So I agree. I think this is what Navara wants. Not saying this is an opening, that has a big advantage, and not saying that Hikaru has made a mistake to be here. But if you want to spice things up and give yourself a long game with some chances, no, maybe you're happy with Navara here.
No, I like the opening choice. The issue is that Hikaru is kind of an E5 specialist, and that's how he has fashioned himself in the last couple of years. He proved that once again in the Candidates tournament, although he lost a game to Timur Rajabov, but by and large, Hikaru has been getting excellent positions on the black side of the Berlin Rue Lopez and on the black side of the Italian. So here we see the pawns on A4 and B4, as is the modern fashion, right? This isn't how people used to play the Italian. I don't think White almost ever put the pawn on B4, but in the last couple of years, White has practiced the sort of queenside expansion. The ideal scenario is knight C4 followed by B5. And Aman, you could see a scenario where this gets really dangerous for Black really quickly. For example, let's say after knight C4, Black dilly-dallies. Let's make a random move. After B5, AB5, AB5, no problem. The bishop is defended. It's okay. After B6, you can already resign. So we're not talking about some hypothetical play here 20 moves down the line. This is a clear and present danger. And so what you often see Black players doing here is trying to quickly go for kingside counterplay, either with a rook lift or with, knight H5, knight F4, some sort of maneuver to muddy the waters on the king side.
Yeah, and the funny thing about your line there, which I really enjoyed, was your random king H8 move. It honestly was not even that bad. Like, you were doing king H8, and let me make this awful move to show variation. And the Eval Bar was like, Eval Bar was like, actually, that's pretty good.
Well, okay, and rook B1 by Mr. Navarro. B5 is being prepared. He is not hiding his intentions on the queen side. And I am very curious to see how Hikaru Nakamura sort of arranges his pieces on the king side. Here he goes for the typical knight C6 to E7 to G6 maneuver, which largely kind of takes the sting out of the move B5. That move no longer comes with tempo.
And I think, it's not a really serious idea, but with the rook on A1, if you play B5, you do have to watch out for bishop takes F2. And if that happens to you, you're definitely caught a little bit off guard. So rook B1, just getting off the A file. B5 wants to happen, knight C4, but you mentioned it. Really typical idea here. I think everyone who plays E4, watches these games, definitely something to remind yourself of. White could do the same plan. Knight F1, knight G3. Black's going for it with knight C6 to E7, knight E7 to G6.
Yeah, copying each other. You often see knights on F3 and G3, knights on F6 and G6. So we have here a pretty standard Italian position, but Hikaru already up 3 minutes on the clock. We will keep a very close eye on this middle game. But right now, let's keep an eye on the Svidler Nepo game. It has just begun. Let us make a quick tour of our remaining two matches. And Peter Svidler with the white pieces, 1e4 and a bishop's opening, which is what Levon Aronian played against Matlakov in their game one.
Yeah, and this bishop's opening, as we call it, is basically just the, I like to refer to it as the anti-Petrov. When you play E4, E5, knight F3, knight F6, Black is playing one of the most, equalizing and, dare I say, boring openings in chess. Very symmetrical. And bishop to C4, bishop's opening, this is designed against a player that you already know plays the Petrov this way. So you're saying, look, I know if I play knight F3, that you're probably going to play knight F6. Mm-hmm. And so bishop C4 avoids that and gives you other options to continue playing the game.
But Aman, they told me knights before bishop. but they told me to develop my knights before bishops. Yeah, exactly. Let's not pretend that there is no downside to this opening, right? There is no free lunch in chess. When you avoid one opening, you open another entirely different can of worms. And the can of worms that you have opened here, well, there's multiple. The E4 pawn is sort of hanging. There was a threat of trapping the bishop. And just visually, Nepo's position looks great. I mean, he's got the center, provided that he can keep the E5 pawn nicely defended him on. It already appears to me that he's solved all of his opening problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you play moves like Castle here as Black, first of all, it shows that you're well prepped, but there are just so many hanging pawns in this position that nobody seems to care about. E4, hanging.
Yeah.
E5, hanging. It's like, okay, who's gonna blink first type of thing? Because clearly some of these pawns can be taken, and at least should be taken. And knight takes e5.
And
Hey,
are
I'm happy to
taken.
see it. Let's see the proof.
Yeah, Mr. Nepo, your pawn is hanging. Why don't you show me what you got? And Nepo says, sure, I'm going to show you what you got. And what he's got is queen c7 attacking the knight. And if the knight moves back to f3, then Nepo recaptures on e4. Let's bring up an analysis board, delve a little bit into these complications. So after d takes e4, knight takes e4, I don't think white is in any trouble, Aman, but this could get a little bit unpleasant. Rook e8, white's not castled yet, and it's obvious that Nepo is not worse here. So Peter Svidler, f2, f4, an ambitious move.
Wow.
And he tries to keep the knight established on e5. Nepo still recaptures the pawn on e4. The one problem for Nepo here might be his lack of development. Can Peter Svidler punish Jan for delaying the development of his entire queen side? What do you think?
And there's something that seems a little bit interesting here. If you pull up an analysis board, Dania, let's say that white castles. Because we want to say, all right, we don't care about this pawn. I'm just looking at the move a4, followed by the move queen b6 check. And before you know it, it's like things could be going really wrong here on the b2 square. Now, still lots of counterplay the other way, but this is something that you just don't account for when maybe you castle. You just throw that move out, don't even see that, hey, there's like a 2-3 move tactic incoming.
And I think that is precisely why Peter Svidler decided to start with knight c3. That prevents a4. And obviously queen b6 is not as effective and white is uncastled. Peter, in this position, might actually be thinking about just castling and ignoring the pawn on d3, prioritizing his development. But I don't really think that's his style. My guess is that he's going to recapture on d3. But the issue, Aman, is after queen takes d3, knight bd7. I mentioned that there's no free lunch. Well, there's no free lunch. That pawn on f4 becomes a serious weakness in a lot of these positions, right? If you move the knight from e5, it's hanging. If you don't move the knight from e5, well, black is just threatening to take twice. So it's a very tense position, and I can see either side getting into some trouble here if they're not careful.
Yeah, and you know, this is a really interesting game we've got from the Bishop's opening. Compare that to the other Bishop's opening game we saw. So just shows you the variation selection that players make really determines an opening. It's not like one specific opening is just boring in every line. I was going to say, might it be interesting to see long castle? I know short castle is kind of the move as well, but long castle, ooh, you know, the rooks start to get to the middle and some fun. As Yasser would say about long castle, he would say, it's legal.
Right, yeah. Euphemism for...
yeah, I'm not so sure about that, but...
And there it is, it's on the board. Look at you, Aman. It is on the board. Peter Svidler putting on his Mikhail Tal hat. Yep. Peter Svidler, I think, met Mikhail Tal when he was a kid. He was recently telling his story about that, but didn't quite have the courage to speak to him. But here, Svidler's intentions are clear, and they are very bloody. He wants to checkmate Jan Nepomniachtchi on the king side, perhaps with a g-pawn march up to g5. So my guess is he's going to take back with a knight and then send his g-pawn down the board. Full send. Black's going to go b5, and we're going to get a good old-school opposite side castling barn burner. So get yourself ready, folks, for a violent game.
Yeah.
Okay, we should check the Levon game, by the way, because crazy stuff is happening there as well.
Yep. So let's head over to that game. And obviously, there will be a lot to come back to in this one.
But here, Maxim Matlakov has sacrificed an exchange. The opening was a Catalan. This is a particular variation of the Catalan. If we rewind, where the queens are traded very early, this is a very, very famous line. And in this position, black plays c3, giving back the pawn in order to ruin white's queenside pawn structure. It comes at a cost, though. The cost that it comes at is the b file, and the fact that white's light-squared bishop is a whole lot better than its counterpart. So, Aman, we had some maneuvering. Maxime got his knight to d3. Levon put some pressure on e2, and then he won the exchange, but Maxime grabs b7, and now he grabs e5, and f7 is also hanging. Has Levon underestimated white's compensation? And maybe you can't even talk about compensation because white is technically up material.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Like, did you win material? I don't even know if that's fair to say, because this is one of the spots where you win something and it's as you calculated, but then it happens and you're like, okay, wait a minute. Why am I the one that's happy about this? I spent the time calculating. This is supposed to be my variation. How come you got a good position?
Those moments when you underestimate something and you get to the position, you say, wait, this was supposed to be good. And then you realize that none of the ideas you had in mind actually work. I think that Levon seriously underestimated maybe the fact that white has 2 pawns for the exchange, maybe the activity of white's minor pieces. I think the key for Maxime here is to unfurl his remaining minor pieces. Maybe go knight b3. I guess first he has to decide if he wants to keep the additional pair of rooks on the board. If you don't, though, if you play rook takes a7, I don't know. The eval bar seems to like it. I'd be really scared to make that move. I mean, after bishop b4, there's already a mate threat.
Yeah, I would be very scared. What's weird about this position is that with the king on e1, my brain is like, wait a minute. How did white's rook from h1 just vanish? Like,
how's that possible?
Yeah, it just fell off the board a little bit. It just slipped off h1 and no one bothered to put it back. It's like, wait a minute, what?
Wait, how did it? Oh, because white actually this is rare. White castled kingside and then brought his king manually back to its initial position. No, I didn't remember that. I was starting to investigate how it happened.
Yeah, so strangely, we actually have the king who's castled, the rook was lost, and then we're marching right back into the center. And a lot of pieces are actually pretty close to their starting squares. I totally agree with you. Rook takes a7. I can't play that move. It looks so risky. But hey, when you start picking up all the pawns in the position, the onus starts to be on Aronian. It's like, hang on, man. At some point, you got to prove something because now that's 3 pawns plus that monster bishop from g2 on the a8 square. That a pawn going to become a queen in due course.
Yeah, that red carpet is going to be unrolled pretty quickly. So a big decision here for Maxime. I mean, I could totally see a case being made for a trade of rooks and the knight p3, but the common wisdom is that when you're down in exchange, you want to keep an additional pair of rooks on the board because minor pieces aren't always capable of, handling themselves particularly well when there's a rook jumping from one side of the board to another. So you could have all the pawns in the world, but you're often still craving a rook. So we'll leave Maxime to make this important decision. We'll check back into this fascinating endgame pretty soon. Shall we fly on over to Nakamura International Airport? Take a look at that Italian game. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, we haven't been there in a little bit, and I want to see what, if any, progress Navara has made towards, a semblance of an advantage, because I've been saying I think this is a critical game for him. For example, you hand a draw to Hikaru. First of all, where is Hikaru? I was gonna say, is he with us? He seems really distraught here. And I was gonna say the position's good.
Has he blundered a queen?
Yeah.
Is he down? Is he down a piece? No, and no. He's doing
just wanted to make sure that I was counting the material right there, because I was about to say Hikaru's done a great job, and then I looked at Hikaru and I was like, no, wait, okay, maybe not. Maybe he hasn't. What's wrong here?
It's funny that chess players' faces almost never correspond to the position that's on the board. It's a very risky thing.
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh, that was such a cool move by David. Look at that. Let's pull up an analysis board because it looks like he blundered a knight. But
yeah, you and I were in shock for a moment.
Because there's actually 2 ways to trap the queen. Can you believe that?
Amazing.
There's rook b4 and knight d2, and both of these moves trap the queen on c4. So Hikaru saw that, and he had actually pre-moved knight takes c4.
It's important, by the way. Really important just to establish that dominance, that if you play the move d takes e4 as white, and as black, if you don't have knight takes e4 pre-moved, you lose a lot of credibility as a grandmaster. Because then it's like, oh, haha, you didn't see that this was a trap.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you can then just play the right move, knight takes pawn, the fact that you pre-move it lets your opponent know, yeah, cool move, buddy, but I saw it as well.
This had no chance of working.
Yeah.
Friend.
It was not even close.
Mein Freund. Queen takes c4 now is on the board. Of course, the landscape has changed quite a bit. The queen still has d5, and it also is attacking the c3 pawn. And David Navara's bishop on a7 is hanging. So I would imagine that the natural move is to bring the bishop back to d4, but then you have to reckon with moves like rook a2. You know, these open center positions, Hikaru is so dangerous in, because there's a high risk of blundering something or missing a tactical detail, but not if you're Hikaru Nakamura.
Yeah, and I think if you take the queens off the board, I might like that bishop a little bit more, but with the bishop and queens on the board, something about the position just looks so much easier for Hikaru Nakamura to play. So I wouldn't even be surprised to see maybe Naka start pushing. It really depends what David does. But you got this loose bishop on a7. You highlighted it. If that bishop retreats, rook a2. And these are the tricky moves that need to be played. Knight to d4. Whoa. Everything is hanging in this position.
What is happening?
The engine is like, guys, relax. It's a draw.
Chill out. Stop making a mountain of a molehill. It's just equal. And we are going to have some sort of liquidation here, but I'm trying to figure out, first of all, how white restores the material equality. Okay, I was going to say let's bring up an analysis board, but they're making moves so quickly. I think this is just going to fizzle out into a draw. This is exactly the way that David Navara should play. Knight takes c7, I think basically ends the game. Rook takes a7, rook takes b1, and it's time to sign the peace accords.
That was incredible how quickly, and that's just a testament to how well these two can calculate, because they were both on the same page, but they were on a page that nobody else was on.
Yeah, they're on page 600, and we're still, you know, reading the preface to the book.
Yeah.
Is this just a dead draw? Does anybody have any minuscule chances? I don't think so. I don't think either side is in any danger of losing their respective b pawn.
Maybe I don't know. White has chances, if anything. Just feel like you can try to bring the rook around, like rook d1, d8, b8, exactly, and like you can sort of dream. But the thing is, there's the counterplay the other way is always so swift. Rook a1 check, rook a2, and you just can't defend everything.
No, this knight is perfectly placed. You can never play g3 because you drop h3. If you play h4, then you create other weaknesses. No, this is a 99%. I'm 99% confident that this is going to end in peace. And like you said, a fantastic result for Nakamura, holding effortlessly with black, or so it seemed. He really was under no pressure throughout the entire game. I mean,
that was comfy.
That was comfortable. He drew from a position of strength, and he's going to have the white pieces and a chance to put it all away in the next game.
Yep. I don't think we will see this one last too long, so we can leave it at this and say this is a very, very likely draw.
We need to switch to the Peter Svidler game because it is getting crazy, ladies and gentlemen. Let's switch to our opposite side castling barn burner in Svidler Nepomniachtchi. Both minor pieces are hanging. Look at what is happening. Knight back to e5 was the last move by Svidler. There was a trade. And Nepo, is he going to move the knight? Does somebody like Nepo do that? No. c4, counterattacking the bishop. What is happening here?
Holy smokes. Okay, well, we promised this would be an exciting one to come back to, and it certainly is. The first move that you should all be calculating, I think, is pawn takes knight. It's the most forcing. It's the one that deserves evaluation. And wow, I was about to say queen d6. Holy smokes. So he really didn't like some of the complications there, did Peter.
Yeah, let's bring up an analysis board. I wanted to show, first of all, some people might be attracted to queen g5. Unstoppable mate. Unstoppable mate the other way. The problem is that CB opens up the C file. So I can't blame Peter for disliking this position. The pressure on c2 is really, really annoying. So instead he chooses queen d6. And I guess the idea, Aman, is that after queen takes d6, you have to take with the rook. You have to keep contact with the knight, obviously. Yeah. What worried me initially is the move knight to e8. Is Svidler going to take a page out of Maxim Matlakov's book and sacrifice an exchange in the endgame? I think he is.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, he also has the idea of rook d8 and then knight b6. I don't know if that works, but it looks like something. Knight b6.
Definitely
Maybe you
an
could start with
alternative.
knight b6 instead of rook d8. I'm not too sure, but yeah, this idea of like trying to win that piece back. So it looks like he's got options, which is very
No,
nice.
he's spoiled for choice here. But I think after bishop takes c4, I wouldn't want to
I
have
like
this
this.
position in a rapid game with black. This seems so much easier and
Yep.
more fun to play with white, unless you lose the d6 pawn. But that doesn't seem to be even a remote possibility at this point. So Nepo has an important decision to make after queen d6. Queen takes d6 is not forced. But if you don't take on d6, what do you do? Where do you put your queen? Because ef6
Yeah.
and queen takes f8 becomes a big threat.
Yeah, I guess you could do rook a7 to defend the queen. That's one idea. But I'm looking at this position. I'm seeing once again tail of the tape, Jan Nepomniachtchi with a huge time edge. And the thing is, while it evens up towards the end of the game, what Jan does is he doesn't take a lot of time with decisions that are not very critical, and he leaves himself with that mountain of time on his clock to evaluate the stressful positions like this, like the ones that need attention. And in this position, you see Svidler, he's only got 3 minutes and change. He's probably even making the move queen d6 because of the time pressure.
Mm-hmm.
He'd rather have the queens off.
And he needs clarity in the position. He needs it very quickly because you're not going to survive 10 more moves of anarchy and chaos with less than 4 minutes on your clock. But you're absolutely right. Nepo's time management gives him the luxury of, you want to take 5 minutes on a move? Absolutely. By all means, he can do that and still have the same amount of time that Svidler has.
Yeah.
Which basically means he's up 5 minutes. That was a very long-winded way of saying that, but you get the point. Rook takes d6 is on the board. The queens are off the board. And now the big question, do you go knight e8 or do you play the simpler c takes b3, e takes f6? When the smoke finally clears, and it's hard to say who's got the slight upper hand. Probably, it's hard to say. Galvar seems to think it's black.
I think that the knight on a4 really wants to play knight b6 and trade for something, because if you get a position where black captures the bishop and loses knight on f6, I think that position is really uncomfortable for Nepo with queens. Without queens, the pawn can be captured. I know it looks bad to open up your king, but when it comes to the end game, you're not as scared about that. And black will use the c-file. Bishop somewhere, like f5, rook c8.
Totally.
White's king is a little bit uncomfortable.
And that, by the way, is another benefit of the move knight b6, the fact that it covers c8. But your earlier idea, rook a7, rook c7, could circumvent that potentially. Gosh, there's still so much going on. There's 3 separate pairs of pawns that are staring at each other. Okay, b takes c2 is straightforward. And okay, now the ball is firmly back in Svidler's court. He might want to grab on g7 just to rid himself of this headache. Instead, he goes knight b6.
Yeah.
Jeez. The sparks are still flying, even though we have very few pieces left on the board.
Yeah, I think that was the right call by Svidler, just all things considered. Do you keep this knight? Because I'm not sure taking is the way to go.
No, because then black takes and defends c2.
Exactly.
And actually winning that back is going to be a nightmare because b3 is coming in.
Yeah, oh god, don't even start with that. But actually, if you look at the eval bar, we've somehow come back to parity here, and maybe Svidler keeps the knight with knight d5, the clock evening up. I think, dare I say, could this be the same as game number 1, headed towards a draw after a huge middle game scramble?
Which Svidler would not mind at all. The lower rated player always wants things to boil down to one critical game that raises the probability and the possibility of something crazy happening. Okay, so it looks like the smoke has more or less cleared. We are more or less expecting a draw here. Knight d7 maybe, but Svidler still has to be very, very careful. He is down a lot of time on the clock. Okay, the Navara-Nakamura game has not ended yet, and David Navara is down to 30 seconds. The Aronian game is heating up as well. Which one should we go to next?
Well, let's just have a look at where Hikaru's game stands, because I think we'll be able to tell with that time pressure is this a real push for either player?
Yes.
Or are we basically wrapping this up?
This is a real push for either player, and it's a real push for black.
Yeah, and the either player is the either one named Hikaru.
the one who's got the black pieces here.
Yeah, this is not the situation you want to be in, and Hikaru definitely created this position with just the skills that he has as a speed chess player, because the eval, everything about the position screamed draw. But if Hikaru is able to win this game, Dania, that might just put this match away. Not officially, but
he blundered his knight.
Wait, the knight is just hanging?
I think after rook da, I think rook da wins, and he plays it. It's over.
Rook a8.
King d7.
King d7.
Goodbye.
And
see you later.
Amazingly, you need the square that your pawn occupies.
Or you needed a7. That's why rook a7 was a blunder. The knight had only one escape square, and it was a7. Both games, Aman. David Navara gets his knight trapped, essentially.
And he was just betrayed there by his own pieces. Both of them, the pawn and the rook, took both squares.
This is going to be a vintage Hikaru Nakamura one. You get an endgame in which 90% of players would just agree a draw. And not only does he win it, it's not some 60-move affair, he gets Navara into time pressure and milks it for 30 moves, just wins the knight on move 40. And the game is over. He is up 2-0. When Hikaru's in this kind of form, he's unstoppable.
Even if he didn't win that night, he was going to probably win that game. So
yeah,
I feel like it just accelerated things. But with 20 seconds and a tough position, Hikaru looked like he was doing, already vintage Hikaru stuff where he was going to pull away. And now with a 2-0 lead, he just needs to draw Dania. And he certainly looks like he's in great form in this match.
Nobody has made a 2-0 comeback in the CGC. If somebody does it for the first time and it's against Hikaru Nakamura, then, the universe will practically explode. An impressive display in the first two games, and David Navara is doing his best, but his best is not good enough against Hikaru Nakamura's good form. I've flipped to the Matlakov Aronian game, where you might remember that white sacrificed in exchange for 2 pawns.
That's right.
And right now, the position does look pretty dynamically balanced. We have a repetition of moves. Will Aronian go along with it?
I would be okay with the repetition, maybe for either side. Like,
yeah.
One of the fairest repetitions in chess right here. You're watching it. Because I definitely think that if you don't go for it, you just might be immediately worse, no matter which side you are.
I think for Maxime, bishop takes b4 and king c3, I could see a case being made for, because this bishop is really active. You have this idea of going e5, knight e4. But I agree with you, Aman. Look at that 8 pawn. Black can push that pawn to a3, creating an anchor point for the rook on b2. So you could see this going astray really fast. Totally understandable decision.
Yeah.
And another draw in game 2. This match is tied 1-1, and that means we only have one other game remaining. That is right. Svidler against Nepo. Here we go.
A very even match between Aronian and Matlakov. So looking forward to the rest of those games there. But in terms of games that are still ongoing, we have one that, the eval bar is not given any credit here. But as time starts to tick lower and lower, these players, especially Svidler, I wonder, is there going to be anything between them? White's position appears to be solid.
No, this is just a draw. Nepo really has one threat, and that is rook a2. So I think Svidler could do well to evacuate his king from under these from the confined space into the center where it has plenty of real estate. I don't think.
Okay,
Nepo
let's play spot the draw. Let's play spot the draw.
Spot the draw.
Like, how is it going to happen?
Spot the repetition. Okay, well, one of them is king f6, king c2. Some sort of like rook a2, king d3, rook c8 maybe. But that's not really a repetition. I think this is going to go on, actually, Aman, for maybe another 10, 15 moves, at least.
King c2, rook c8, king b2, rook
a8.
I'll submit that into evidence.
Wow. Okay, you're a lot better. I see why you proposed this game. You knew you were better at this game than
I already knew what I was going to submit as my winning answer. And I'm just hoping that I could get you to play along.
Nepo's going for it. He's going to go rook a2. I know Jan. he's going rook a2. He won't be able to resist the temptation.
You're correct.
Woo! Touche, my friend. It's 1-1.
So now we're 1-1 in our match. Rook c8.
Threatening rook c3, which would win the pawn on g2.
So rook,
take g2.
you know, now once again, white's rooks are a little funny because if you check with either one of them, the king moves and attacks a rook. So you can't just check forever.
Yep. Yeah, the king would have moved to e6. Rook d4 is a classy move by Mr. Svidler. I think after rook c3, king e4, you're going to get mutual liquidation. White's going to take b4, black's going to take g2. And white's actually not worse there. I mean, white's the one with the passer in that position. I think it's time for Nepo to bring this one to an end.
Rook e2, king. I mean, do you have to go king f4?
You can go king d5 also, but then I would take on g3 and take on
g2. Yeah, then you lose a couple pawns.
So you should probably go king f4 and maybe spot the draw attempt number 2.
Right.
Rook f2, king e4, rook e2, king f4.
Yep.
Okay, Nepo is thinking, but Svidler, I have to say, he's still over a minute I'm on. He has done a fantastic job. The endgame was relatively simple, but he's not letting himself drop to like 2 seconds on the clock. You know, he's not doing the Grishuk.
That's right.
Moving with 0.3 seconds. And
no, you don't want that. You don't want that.
Not at all.
Rook f2, king g4. But the thing is, after rook f2, I don't think there's any interest for Peter to play king g4. He's going to play king e4 for sure.
Yeah, you don't want to press your luck there. No, Nepo's still going for a rook c2. Okay, rook takes b4.
I think you take that pawn because even though you can grab g2 as black, white will just move the h pawn to safety, and there's also rook b6 check.
Yeah, I like how Nepo's probably thinking about throwing in rook f2, and he does. And Svidler's like, all right, Jan, let's just, let's take our break. Let's finish this show up. Rook takes g2 and king h3 is a draw. The funny thing is, even without white's b and h pawns, this would still be a theoretical draw.
that is a good point that people should know. This is a theoretical draw with the h and f pawns. So white actually doesn't need any of the pawns, and he has 2.
Although making that draw is like when I get a piece of IKEA furniture and it comes with this card that shows you how to assemble it. There's no words on it. There's just 15 symbols and screws appear in various places. I know I'm never going to do it.
Yeah, not to mention a very, very happy caricature that's succeeding at every step.
Exactly. It's like perfectly done. Oh, it just takes 10 minutes. Drawing F and H is really difficult, but drawing this position is not. We end in peace. 2 of the matches are incredibly even. 2 draws, neither side really having an advantage at any point throughout any of these 4 games in Nepo, Svidler, and Aronian Matlakov I'm on. This is going to really come down to the wire, which is good for the lower rated player.
It is. I mean, this is going to be super exciting. Granted, Hikaru Nakamura is very close to closing out his match. He's going to have the white pieces in game number 3. That's about to happen. But in Nepomniachtchi Svidler, it's been so even. We've seen time advantages for Jan. But Svidler coming back, defending well every single game. Aronian, Matlakov, I think, has been the closest match of all of them, Dania. So really excited to see what happens next.
Me too. And before we go on break, we want to remind you that the 2022-23 Collegiate Chess League in partnership with NACE Star League begins Saturday, September 24th. That is today. Sign-ups close today for students. So make sure to sign up at go.chess.com/CCL to represent your school in the Premier Chess League for college students. And on that note, we will be taking a short break. You are watching the Chess.com Global Championship. We'll be back with game 3 of these fascinating round and 32 matches on the other side of this short break.
open to anyone, all around the world.
Are you kidding me?
The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
Whoa!
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
You don't just do this to Shakhriyar in a critical game, except Alexei Sarana just did. Gorgeous chess. He makes his way into the round of 16.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
What a move! Duda moves on to the round of 16.
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first-place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 32. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
A look at the legend himself, Grandmaster Peter Svidler, with a pristine, genteel bookcase made of ancient wood behind him. Huge Wizard 2 says that Svidler is in an ancient library. It certainly looks that way. Well, Peter Svidler is taking inspiration from the books and the memorabilia behind him, and he has brought his A game to this match against Jan Nepomniachtchi here at the CGC round of 32. GM Daniel Naroditsky, GM Amon Hamilton, bringing you coverage of the round of 32 as we pull up our Svidler Nepo matchup card, Amon.
Yeah, I think it's just pure irony that, of course, it's huge wizard that lets us know about Svidler's lair that he's got there. I mean, I think they might be practicing some sort of witchcraft together. I saw a few spell books in the back, but he's certainly doing a good job so far in this match on a serious note because he looks comfortable. He's definitely down on time, but who isn't against Nepomniachtchi? You can't, that's not even something that I can say. It doesn't hold any weight. Everyone is down on time against this guy. I think when it comes to the matches, Nepo is managing the time the way that he wants to, but I think Svidler is as well. Like, he's never been in a situation where he's needed significantly more time than he has.
No, you're totally right. He's done a great job on all fronts. So has Maxim Matlakov. Let's not forget that he is also an underdog. He's a serious underdog, and he has held his own completely, especially in game one, but also in game two. One could argue even putting some pressure on Levon. The only underdog who has not had the same good performance is David Navara. He's done his best, but Hikaru Nakamura has been utterly unstoppable. That last game was a heartbreaker. David Navara blundering a knight in an equal rook endgame, although by that point already he was slightly worse.
Yeah.
He needs the miracle, the comeback of the millennium. If he can come back and win 2 games and then win the Armageddon, this will probably be the greatest comeback of all time.
It absolutely will. There's no question about it. This isn't even 2 games that could have gone either way. These have been 2 Hikaru Nakamura domination games. And even in the last game, which was so equal, Hikaru still managed to use something that he had earned over the course of that game, which was a time advantage. He used it well, and he still came out on top. So up 2 games, Hikaru with the white pieces. We saw how well that first game went. Hikaru's now going for queen c2, and Daniel, is this influenced at all by the fact that he knows he only needs a draw?
Nah, why would you be saying that, Amon? Not queen c2. It's not really known as one of the most solid openings against which it's almost impossible to win. Nah, totally not thinking about it at all. But well, yeah, queen c2, of course. But okay, in the very reputable variation.
Solid.
How David Navara will create winning chances in this position is big question, yes, because white is incredibly solid in this line.
Big question, no answer. I think this line has been plaguing players probably from both sides. I mean, white's winning chances have always been grim, I think, here. And black's winning chances have been few and far between.
Yeah, I mean, so we should point out that d5 by David isn't necessarily the main move. I think most people at this point castle, but that allows white to play the move e2, e4. If white really wants a draw, e4 basically seals the deal. I mean, there's a long theoretical line that results in a drawn opposite colored bishop position. David going for the immediate d5 and a3 by Hikaru, early a3. Aman, that's definitely not the main move. I'm checking Opening Explorer just to confirm. Bishop g5 is almost automatic in the vast majority of top-level games. So Hikaru deviating early and forcing David to make a decision with his dark-squared bishop.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I wonder what choice he'll make here, because David also has to keep in mind that it's a must-win game. So he might be thinking from the perspective of imbalances. Yes, you can retreat that bishop, maybe to d6, maybe to e7, but there's so many available options there for white to just get a solid game. I think taking the knight is the right call. Now you have a position where, yes, you've handed over the two bishops, but you don't care which side of the imbalance you have. You just want to have an imbalance. The pawn structure is imbalanced. Maybe a move like, a5, a4 later for black. We might see kingside castling. So look, it might not be the greatest, but I think Navara's on the right path with creating an imbalance and just creating it early.
Yeah, he's gotten the kind of position you want to get. I agree completely. He's developed his light squared bishop to f5, posing now a dilemma to Mr. Nakamura. Now, you sometimes see players, these types of positions, pushing the pawn out to f3. I know, Ben, quiet down. The point of this move is to control the e4 square, but the downside, apart from weakening the king side, is that you're depriving the knight of its sort of rightful developing square. So if Hikaru wants to play this in a more sort of milquetoast kind of fashion, then he can play bishop g5, e3, bishop d3, sort of the same old stuff. And given that he needs to draw, I think Hikaru is more likely to err on the side of being overly conservative.
Agreed. I think that what you highlighted is a really interesting way to really neutralize things. Now, there is a sort of I guess a known thing in the community of us chess players, Dania, when you try too hard to trade all the pieces off and go for a draw, you usually end up losing. It's a bad way to play chess. You need to be objective at every point, and playing bishop g5 as white, taking the knight straight away, playing bishop d3, just vacuuming all the pieces. It's objectively not the way to play. So you have to be careful. Every decision you make that, is just not quite the best move and you know it, eventually that adds up to an advantage that you might regret later. So Hikaru, the player that he is and how familiar he certainly is with what I just talked about, bishop f4, probably e3, knight f3. He's just going to play the game as it's supposed to be played, and he's got a great position. Certainly looks just about equal here.
Bishop pair, no targets in white's position.
Yeah.
And as you know, there are unbalances here. The pawn structure is interesting. There's some meat on the bone, but there isn't too much of it. I think Hikaru was off to a good start in this game. And something crazy will have to happen here for David Navara to win this. He might have to push c7, c5 at some point. But right now, the c7 pawn is hanging. You can't play c5. And playing c6, Aman, that just leads to a kind of insipid position that he's going to have a hard time winning. Maybe something spicier like knight e4 can be considered. But I don't know if you can get away with a pawn sack at a juncture this early with your development still not complete.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times you can sack this pawn, but usually there are other pieces on the board, and we're not quite in that position at the moment. So Navara's got a weird decision to make, because pawn to c6, as you highlighted, if you ever go for castling, then suddenly your dark squares are a lot weaker. You went for castling immediately, which means, and boy am I happy to see it, there's an option for Hikaru to take that pawn. Dania, instinct, is he going to take it?
No, instinct is he's going to play e3.
Yeah, just not even bother, right?
Not even bother, although he's going to calculate it. Hikaru's not one of those players who just trusts anything that his opponent does. He plays f3. H5 by Navara. Whoa.
Okay,
this
those
is
moves
blowing my mind. I would never predict those two moves.
This is very, very surprising. First of all, f3 when you only need a certain result, a draw, it just seems unnecessary. But then h5 straight away. I mean, I feel like I would
h5.
I feel like I would even consider maybe like c5 there, something like really, really direct after seeing f3.
And before we go to the Nepo game, which just started, the idea of going G4, it is scary, but it's not something that I would take such drastic measures against. Okay,
Yeah.
White plays G4, you drop the bishop back to E6. It's not the end of the world. And guess what? I don't think Hikaru would play G4 without a good deal of thought, weakening his king side like that. H5 creates a gaping hole on G5. White can entrench a bishop onto that square if he so desires. I feel like that was a hasty decision by David. And now Hikaru is quickly going to complete his kingside development. And I think White's better here.
Agreed.
Okay, so we have the other two games are underway. Aronian repeating his opening from game one, the bishop's opening. We'll go to that game shortly. But first, let's check in, as is our tradition, to the Svidler Nepo game. Oh, apologies for that.
Let's check in with Svidler Nepo, I believe, because that game that we just saw right there, we can't predict any moves of, Dania. So let's head somewhere where we can actually call the moves a little bit better than that one. Because, look, if you're putting me in the commentary booth and you're saying, guess the next couple moves, and it's F3, H5, Queen E6, look, I'm sorry, I'm not cut out for this. So, look, I'm happy to be here, Dania. E4, E5, nice. I'm comfortable.
Yeah, this is the traditional, well-known, plain vanilla Roy Lopez position.
Yep.
The kind we all feel comfortable in. Now, what Peter Svidler has carried out here is a line that has become significantly more popular in recent months. I know Magnus Carlsen has been testing it out. It's this weird thing where, if we rewind a little bit, Bishop C5 is totally normal. This is, I think, the Archangel. But in most cases, traditionally, Black plays B5 and D6. Who needs D6 on? Who needs to open up their light squared bishop at all? That's what the old guys do. The cool kids don't do that anymore.
Exactly.
94 bishop C2 and D5 in one fell swoop.
Finally, there it is. Such an important move to play for the minor pieces in Black's, but just getting things open up. That D pawn stuck on D7 is simply the worst. So many times you see in this opening, if White gets to play D5 before Black does, then it's kind of trouble. But what we see here is definitely a position, I would say, well, especially after CF6, that I'm happy with if I'm Nepo.
Has Peter Svidler infected whatever has plagued Hikaru and David? Whatever that that condition is, where it's a compulsion to move your kingside pawns.
What is this? Is this theory? Wait a minute. Svidler has
Svidler is the one with
minutes.
15 minutes.
Okay, I'm convinced.
Let me say that again. Svidler has 15 minutes. Nepo has 13 minutes.
Yeah, the first time you said it, I legitimately didn't believe you.
You repeat that? Did you confuse your pronouns? Did you mean to say Nepo where you said Svidler? Nope. Svidler's the one with 15 minutes. This must be preparation. Must be.
Yep, no doubt about it. Now, that being said, this is the kind of preparation that sometimes you even need to be a little bit careful with. Like, it's the kind of preparation as Black that I would go over, with the magnifying glass maybe 5-6 times just to make sure that I know what I'm doing after. Because the thing with preparation is once it ends, you don't want to be clueless. You don't want to get to this position and then, Nepo plays knight d2 and you're like, okay, great. I did my prep, right? This was correct. I did it. Okay. But I don't love the position. I've got a weak d pawn on d6, a target on the open file. I've got weak light squares because I played g5. If I play g4, the knight might slide into h4, into f5. So I think this is a position that Svidler definitely needs to have looked at before. I'm sure he has, so he's just taking his time and establishing what he's going to do next. But honestly, this plays really nicely for White.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to be influenced by the eval bar. You see the zeros and you say, this is a dead draw. No, I mean, there's a lot of imbalances. The biggest asset for Black, arguably, is the bishop pair. And the fact that this dark squared bishop is so nicely tucked in on a7. It's safe, it's secure, and it's controlling a lot of key central squares. So I think that White really needs to try to step on the gas pedal in the next couple of moves, while Black still is sort of completing his development, getting the rooks into the game. You got to try to put that I-94. You've been indicating some of the ideas here. Quickly go rook. Do you want to go after the d6 pawn? Because that is the only, concrete, appreciable target in Black's position. So I think we're going to see knight e4 by Jan on the next move, or maybe knight c4. And Peter's going to try to figure out how to arrange where to put his other bishop, first of all, e6 or g4, and how to arrange the rooks. Do you put them on d8 and e8, or do you find something a little bit more creative here?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary, honestly, because I think both players are calculating exactly that at the moment. Svidler, the one spending time, and Nepo, the thing is, like, knight bd2 is his last move. He's got the easier game. He's got the target. He knows where his pieces belong. I think Svidler is the one that has more to prove in this position. So even though this is preparation from Svidler, I have to say, like, I'd be pretty happy as Nepo here.
No, I would be totally satisfied. Nepo likes positions in which he feels comfortable. He feels that he knows the ideas. Another idea, by the way, which Peter could be contemplating, is the move d5. As brazen as it seems to just push your weak pawn even further down the board, as I talk about it, he's just made that move. Not so brazen. It restricts the knight. The knight no longer has access to these two squares, and bishop b3 was nicely met with bishop e6. That's why Nepo instantly plays rook e1, covering the e6 square, and the battle is going to rage over Winterfell, over that pawn on d5.
Yeah, and again, it's that classic frustration. Rook e1 played, and it's like the move that you were counting on next, probably bishop e6, immediately stops. So it's just that little bit of frustration there. Bishop g4, I think, has the intention of just guarding the d-pawn with the rook, and maybe bringing that bishop around the other way, like bishop h5 to f7.
Yes, to overprotection of d5 pawn. And if Black can get d4 in a good version, then we won't even be talking about a potential pull for White. We might be talking about a position that is to be preferred for Black, because Miller still has that bishop pair.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, d4 is really what has to be contained here by Nepo. Bishop g4 also doing another important job, which is it's kind of stopping the move knight b3. Knight b3, White wants to maybe shuffle that knight out, cover the d4 square, play rook d1 and establish a knight there, but bishop takes f3 could be thrown in, and those pawns do not look great.
And that could end up in immediate liquidation and a draw, which at this point in the match, Nepo really, really does not want. I mean, think about it. 3 draws, he's going to have the black pieces in the final game. Anything can happen in one individual game. So something like knight b3, bishop takes f3 is something that Nepo will only resort to if he really does not find any ways of, keeping some meat on the bone in this position. Talk about a lack of meat on the bone. I'm going to be totally honest here, Amon. The Levon Aronian match has been a little bit underwhelming. We haven't been spending as much time, and it's not out of disrespect to Levon or Maxime. These are amazing players, but every time I look at the position, they're in some sort of an end game. So let us go to that game just to update everybody on the position. But it is yet another knight versus bishop endgame. What do you make of this? Maybe this one is a little bit better for White.
Right. Is it the amount of betterness that is needed? Probably not. But it does look a little bit better. I would have to agree. Solid pawn structure for White. He just got rid, or he's in the process of getting rid of, his third pawn island. So what will remain are just the 2 pawn islands, the h3, g2 pawns, and ones on the queen side. And yeah, I was going to say, interesting choice of which pawn to win.
Yeah, because you could... Oh, actually, maybe you couldn't... You probably could have won. You could have played rook f5 and taken on e5, but then the structure would be really symmetrical. At least now there's a bit of an imbalance here.
Yeah, I was actually expecting rook e1 and if king e7, rook f4. But instead, he's kind of gone for taking the c7 pawn and saying, look, the e pawn is still weak. I can win that one whenever. Winning the c7 pawn would have been impossible to do later, and he took the only opportunity he had to grab it while he could.
And Black is experiencing some logistical problems here. If you play f6, let's bring up an analysis board real fast, just to show that it's not all that easy for Black to keep all of his pawns protected, keep his bases covered. Rook c6, bang, bang. Eval Bar hates that move, but This is not an easy position to go for. Last time I checked, black is down a pawn here.
Yeah, this is just a case of the engine being so comfortable being down a pawn. It's full counterattack, I guess.
And look at this line, rook d2. Let me try to win white's queenside pawns in return. Rook c8 check, dropping that rook on h8. These are the consequences of not being fully developed. Even though it's the end game, white still has an initiative because his pieces are more actively positioned. I think this is a big opportunity for Levon. He's up 5 minutes on the clock or so. Yep. He's got definitely, without question, an endgame pull. And things seem to be getting worse for Maxime, who drops the pawn on e5 and sees nothing better than to just acquiesce to a pawn down endgame I'm on. This is trouble for Mr. Matlakov.
And rook d2, rook e2, first move that I think of here, just to cover the second rank, watch over that c2 pawn. There's always going to be pawns hanging. Take a look at the h6 pawn and the b6 pawn in black's position. Some rook c6 move is, later down the line, it's going to hit both of those pawns. I think this position is trending in Aronian's favor. I think there hasn't been much between them in this match, Dania, which it just heightens. It makes this, every individual game means so much. If you can get a win here as Aronian, the way the match has gone, that's a huge edge. That's not just like a turbulent match where both sides are winning and now is your turn. This is a dead even match. Hasn't been anything between them. So one win, that's enough to maybe win the whole thing.
Yeah, you just get the sense that the players have not been able to create too many chances with the white pieces. You're absolutely right. Levon is up a pawn. He's going to continue milking and pushing this position. In the meantime, the Hikaru Nakamura, David Navara game continues to get crazier and more heated. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to jump back to that game. And this is what we currently have on the board. So Navara's task this game was to unbalance the position, create some intrigue. I think he's done that. The problem, Amon, is that he's unbalanced it in the sense that he's worse. White has the center and black doesn't.
Yeah, you have the advantage and I don't. And so the game is imbalanced now. Exactly. Mission success. What do they say? Task failed successfully? Something like that.
Task failed successfully. Yeah, exactly.
I think here, if the match was in a different situation, I would be talking a little bit more about, Hikaru's done a great job. He's got great chances on the king side. Based on the match, it's actually the advantage that I think Hikaru has that is going to be enough to get him a draw. He only needs a draw, and just because he's actually pushing here, I think it's going to be too much for Navara to handle. And even e5, knight d6 here.
He's doing exactly that. And c4, by the way, is just hanging.
Yeah, hanging. Queen g5 is about to magically appear on the board.
Ooh, this is nasty. This is disgusting. I mean, again, let's not forget that David has to somehow win this position. That's not happening. This one's over.
So it looks like Hikaru's in a great spot in this match. The position, unless a draw or perpetual kind of presents itself, it might not even really be possible for a draw to even happen. So we might just see Hikaru actually win the third game and win the match. We have seen a little bit of 3-0 in this competition, right, Dania? In the Global Championship, we have seen some 3-0s. Not too many, granted. Every match has been pretty close. But it does happen, and oftentimes the third win is just a product of that player needing desperately to win, and so taking more risks than usual.
And it's a statement that you're making for subsequent rounds. I mean, not that Hikaru has to make any additional statements. Everybody knows who they're up against.
Yeah.
But he's going to play the board. He's not going to go out of his way to liquidate into an equal endgame when he's winning in the middle game, right? He's not afraid of having the queens on the board. No. All of a sudden.
No, he's not.
So David's still trying it. Knight g4, threatening the pawn on e5. So not to suggest that white doesn't have to be careful here. If you play queen g5, you might run into g6. And I mean, obviously there's some smothered mate ideas. So still some clouds that Hikaru has to navigate through.
Yeah, this one is not over, but Hikaru is rather technical when he needs to be, and he smells that he's got the edge, and there might be a tactic that he should be looking for. I mean, generally he'll spot it.
No, 100%. Okay, well, we can leave him to continue converting his advantage. Which of the other two games do you have the Jones for? I think we should check back to into the Svidler game, because we have some really interesting developments there. Yana is worse.
Yep.
So I think we should go to the Svidler game.
I was going to say that one as well. So we're on the same page.
Ooh.
Queen G5 played. And
before we do that,
hang on a sec. We got to respect the eval bar. It's telling us to stay at least for one more move, right? Because really crucial how Hikaru reacts to this move G6.
No,
right?
100%. I think we will all be forgiven for sticking around a little while longer. H3. Now, it might be the case that Hikaru has spotted some sort of a liquidation into a draw. Exactly what I said he's unlikely to do. If he sees a slam dunk way to get a position he knows he won't lose, then he'll do it. Knight takes c5. I think knight h6 check or rook takes c5 and knight h6 is what
and then just because he'll just grab the c pawn at the end.
Oh yeah, and it's just a draw. Knight h6, queen takes c5, and rook takes c4.
Yeah,
great decition making by Nakamura.
Yeah,
great example of playing the match rather than always trying to play the board.
Hikaru is an expert at that. He doesn't need more than a draw, and so this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I was saying his position is so good that I always see him making a draw or being equal if he needs to be. So he used that edge that he had, and he basically gave it away in exchange for a bunch of pieces flying off the board, and suddenly it's simplified so much that the draw is essentially imminent.
It is, and rook takes c4 is on the horizon. Perhaps Hikaru contemplating an initial check on f4 to send the king back to g7. I don't think it makes a critical difference. ba, queen b1, by the way, is a total paper tiger. The king always has a nice escape square on h2. It always seems like Hikaru has made Luft. I don't even remember when he played h3, and yet it always seems like he's got that move included precisely when he needs it to be included.
Exactly.
Like it's just magically there.
Everything is perfect. He actually just played it, by the way, to attack the knight on g4. So, of course, all in stride from Hikaru. And, well, I think we can safely say this looks like 2.5. The target score will be reached at minimum, which is enough to win this match and knock out David Navara from this competition.
Indeed, it is. We will keep an eye on this game and let you know when it officially finishes. But now I think is a good time to jump to the Svidler game, in which Peter Svidler has not only managed to eradicate the weakness on t5, but he's managed to make the most of his bishop pair. He is most certainly in the driver's seat in this position, but not necessarily more than that. I don't think that Nepo will have too much trouble holding his own here. Still, scary stuff for Jan.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Nepo's backseat driving still a little bit.
Peter offers a draw, though.
Well, I think it's an interesting decision considering a few things, Dania, and I will use this moment to be ever so slightly critical.
Go ahead.
There's not. First of all, I don't think we've seen the time this late into the game. So he's still got 5 minutes and change, lots to play for. The other thing is, it's one of the best positions that he's had all game. And when you work that hard to get there and then just offer a draw, you're not really celebrating properly. When you have the best position that you've had all game, you should probably play it out a little bit because, well, logic would state, Dania, that if you have the best position you've had all game, your opponent probably has the worst position they've had all game. And in that situation,
and I'm going to switch, by the way, to the Aronian game as you keep talking.
Let's switch.
Go ahead.
Let's switch because that game's done.
But go ahead.
Honestly, I think in that situation, you just can't do your opponent any favors. It's the worst thing in chess. Like, you have to think, Nepo's probably sitting there, not liking his position at all, and you're just going to repeat moves to give him a draw? The guy's over the moon. He's like, oh, thanks. Like, my position was actually starting to really be unpleasant, and you smack me with a draw offer right when that happens. It's a good feeling. I don't think you should be that kind to your opponents. That being said, it's not a terrible result, of course, but I think he could have done a little bit more. It's not like he was up against the wall, time pressure, or anything like that.
I agree. I think that's a good explanation. of why you think playing would have been the more prudent option. The speed with which Nepo took that draw for is another indication of that. Nepo does not accept draws in equal positions, right? He only takes them if he feels there's imminent danger, as you're saying. So, okay, obviously the match situation is really good for Peter, right? Absent all of these considerations, if you came up to him and said, Peter, we can make this 4-game match into a 1-game match in which you have the white pieces, basically like an Armageddon game. Maybe we'll have an actual Armageddon game. He would accept that offer with open arms. So this is the most danger that Nepo has been in match-wise in the CGC, obviously, and in the RCC, and in really the last 7 tournaments that he's played. So we are in for a treat, ladies and gentlemen. But first, will Levon Aronian convert his extra pawn? I think the answer is increasingly looking like it will be no. What do you think?
Rook to e6, knight c4, and you're kind of pointing to a4 being the move. I'm gonna take the contrarian view and say no. I know. Imagine us being on
the
opposite
contrarian
sides.
view. Where is our unified front?
I'm telling you, Danya. Look, I'm ready to have your back, but when it comes to Levon Aronian, I just find him to be so technical, and he just squeezes the life out of everything. Aronian is not the kind of guy I think to have this game end very quickly. So at the very least, I think he'll try to play it out, and with a minute and a half for Matlakov, anything can happen.
No, of course, I in all seriousness, I do agree. I think 0.5 is a serious underestimation of the practical chances that Levon holds in this position. Because it's not like if Maxime defends for 10 moves, then magically it's already a draw. Levon can torture him ad infinitum. You can play 50 moves if you want to play 50 moves. You can play 50 moves and then push the pawn to f4.
That's right.
So Maxime is in for the long haul. He's going to have to avoid missing forks. You think 2,700 missing a fork. Well, that knight on e5, we've seen crazier things happen than a GM missing a fork with a minute left on his clock after an already strenuous period of defending. So I'm going to give this a 50-50 chance. I think I can see Maxime holding this, but I can also see a blunder happening, or maybe Levon finding a way to get his pawn eventually to f6. Let's buckle in, strap ourselves in, and watch the show. King will come back to g4 to defend the pawn. Obviously, Aman, I'll finish by saying that the ideal scenario is where Black gives up the bishop for both of White's pawns, but that ain't going to happen. Levon's not going to allow that to happen.
No, and as you say that, he actually cements one of his pawns onto a dark square, and that will ensure that basically is never possible. Bishop e6, and I mean, first thing that comes to mind in my head is pinning that bishop. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is, can we actually pin the bishop and get a position where Black runs out of moves? Like rook a6, rook a7 check, h5. I want to get my knight to g4.
Yeah, knight g4 is a very unpleasant prospect. If Black loses h6, even if a rook trade happens, I think it's lost. Wait, what happened there? Is it winning? Oh, rook a6?
Yeah, rook a6.
Oh my god, I'm on. Rook
G7.
a6, king g7, knight g4. Sorry, we should bring up an analysis board here. This is winning. Rook g6, h5. And if bishop takes g4, the pawn endgame is lost.
So unintentionally, I just kind of...
He missed it!
I said those moves, knight g4, h5, rook a6, but I didn't realize they could all be put in the pot right now.
You literally said all of them. It's winning.
I didn't realize that was the recipe, Danya. It didn't occur to me.
Aman, but he's got to see that. Rook a6 is obvious, right? You're pinning the bishop.
Yeah,
What he missed was obviously knight g4.
Exactly.
But he's got to see that. He's got plenty of time.
That's a really, really big miss from both players, but more so on Levon with the extra time, and he's the one trying to win. He's got to be on the lookout for those. It's tougher as a defender to spot everything.
I don't get it. I mean, Levon, this is precisely the kind of trick that he's trying to set up. He got it served on a golden platter, and he just stubbornly keeps his rook on the 7th rank, giving Maxime a new lease on life. For Matlakov, the strategy is just basically to wait on the 6th rank and wait for Levon to pose concrete threats. White can push the pawn to f4, right? That's not a problem, but how are you going to get that pawn any further than f4? That might have been the golden opportunity.
Yep,
Something
I
tells
think
me he's
so.
going to get another one.
Yeah, I think in positions like this, what you want to do as Levon is pretend like you're trying really cool ideas, and that pretending, takes 30 seconds off both of your clocks, and then everything that you were previously doing is magnified because the time is lower.
No, totally. Yeah, everything is scarier. Every threat more deadly with 30 seconds. And Maxime is burning through his clock, right? He is not breaking even with that 2-second increment.
That's right.
Okay. Those last couple of moves came a long way, though.
There's maybe knight c2, knight e3. The knight's kind of good there. As for this, rook e7, rook e5, is it?
I was going to ask
something?
you, is it out of the question?
I asked you first. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
No, I asked you back, but I was told,
well,
as I said, never to respond to answer a question with a question.
Yeah, I just pass that one over to the chat there. My instinct is that I wouldn't do it because I don't need to.
Oh.
And if I've played 40 moves, moved upon, if I played 40 more moves and it's a long game, I might do that later, but I don't need to commit to that right now. That alleviates maybe a lot of the hard work that I want to make my opponent do.
I love that feeling when you're defending for forever, like some pawn down rook endgame, and finally your opponent just like goes into a Philidor position, which is basically a draw. For that relief, you feel, now I know how to draw this. Levon's not going to give Maxime Matlakov the luxury of that feeling until another 50 moves have passed.
Exactly. This is what I was talking about earlier with the Svidler game. I was saying, don't be too nice to your opponents. They're not going to be nice to you. And when they're in a tough position, don't let them out of it with a draw offer or repetition or trade. Keep them in those tough positions because they don't want to be there.
I can't believe he missed rook a6. I almost always give the player the benefit of the doubt. We've all been in this situation. We know how hard it is to find a resource on demand. We know that when the eval bar screams +7, it's so much easier. But all of that aside, that was an elementary move. And, you can't normally miss these types of chances in the CGC and expect to get away with it.
Agreed.
But maybe he will. Rook a3, great move.
Yeah, really powerful, actually. And when you move those pawns up to dark squares, I think the issue becomes, all of a sudden the bishop on the light squares, it just controls everything, and there's no restricting that bishop any longer.
No, this is, I think, just a dead draw. I think Levon has to take on h3, because if he tries to go the other way, which he did, you're actually just going to end up losing the knight after king e4, bishop g2. He literally, at this point, is out of options. He's going to try to win the h6 pawn, so we might actually get an f and h pawn rook endgame, which I mentioned in a previous game. After all, I don't remember in what context. I think it was the Svidler Nepo game.
It was actually that game, and we were saying like, oh, it's going to be a draw, but actually, if you take every pawn off the board, it's still a draw.
Nice, and rook f1, and with h pawn, it's much easier. But still not great. I wouldn't be shocked if Black loses this game. Rook c6 and king f5 is on deck. Come on.
Yeah.
And it's unpleasant. Ooh.
Okay, so rook a3, right? Not attacking the f pawn. So all of a sudden, white says, "Okay, sure."
Rook a4 maybe is accurate. I don't know.
Rook
a4.
3.
2 seconds.
The thing is, as black, you don't even have to win the pawn, right? You could just play rook g3 there, and I think you're still drawing.
Exactly. You have a safety net. Even if you blunder h6, you're okay. But you're not going to, because f4 cannot be easily defended.
Yeah, this is well done here.
Maxime declines the repetition.
Yeah, good. Yeah, playing on for the win, of course. Rook e6, maybe?
King g6? King g6?
Yeah,
Great
what about
move.
this, though? King g6 it feels too easy for black, allowing that.
No, Levon is going to be heartbroken when he figures out the chance that he missed. Back to g7 goes Matlakov, and the side checks I'm on are always so annoying to face as the attacking side.
Yep, from the long side as well.
What? Why did he repeat f5?
What is that move?
What is rook h5?
That's an insane move.
Winning? Rook c7 and f6, and the king is pushed back to the back rank.
This is what? How could you do that? I don't understand.
Just lost his ever-loving mind. f6 is coming. It's over.
He had the draw. It was right in front of him. He was playing it.
3-time repetition, literally. What did he just do? He
Oh
allowed
my
Levon
god.
to promote.
It's a win. Rook G8. And it's only sunk in now, but he's got 2 seconds for that reality. And look at this. King
Levon
E4,
is
King D3.
zigzagging his way down to E2. This is unbelievable. At the last hurdle, all he had to do was repeat.
Make the same move. He already did the hard work of finding the move. He's already got it. Just do it again.
King G6, that's it. No more way to progress. I think Levon would literally have taken the draw.
Yeah, honestly, there's nothing else to do. No H5,
Rook
no
H5.
F5.
But why are you suddenly going for this meaningless pawn? The entire point of this endgame is to prevent the progress of the F pawn. That is precisely what he doesn't do with that move. I can't believe what we just saw.
That is a shocker, Danya, because it's not like, even if Rook H5 was also drawing, why? You've already found your drawing method. Just keep doing it. I'm absolutely blown away by that move, and he might have just cost himself his spot in this competition, as he's now down. We bring up the scores for the matches. He's now down to Levon Aronian in a match where you could hardly find anything between these two players, and now there's a full point.
And now, not only do you have to recover mentally, but you have to win on demand against Levon, which is hard even if you are in the best of moods and the best of mental places. This is going to be a ridiculously tall order. I can't believe what we just saw. It's just another day here at the CGC. This has been epic, and the greatest part is that we have an amazing game between Nepo and Svidler coming up. That match is all tied up, and we're going to see if Maxim Matlakov can recover after this shocking blunder. Before we go on break, we wanted to remind you that if you are a product manager, if you're at work and watching chess right now on company time, then first of all, shame on you. Just kidding. We need you. We need you to help coordinate events like PogChamps, the Speed Chess Championship, the CGC, and more. Type !PMOE, !PMOE in chat for all details, and combine your passions and love of chess on the world's greatest team. Be a product manager for Chess.com. And right now, be strapped into your seats, because Game 4 in Svidler, Nepo, and Aronian Matlakov is coming right up here at the CGC. Stay tuned for Game 4 on the other side of this short break. Back we are here on a beautiful Saturday afternoon watching the 2022 Chess.com Global Championship alongside the one and only Chessbrot Grandmaster Amon Hambleton. It's been a barn burner in all three of our matches, one of them already concluded. Big surprise, Amon, that Hikaru Nakamura seals the deal after only 3 games against David Navara. The other 2 matches have been very close. A shocking blunder by Maxime. He goes down a point. Nepo against Svidler is our marquee matchup. It is all tied up, and it goes down to the wire. Who, Amon, will make their way to the Final 8 in Toronto?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, at this point, we know Hikaru has done a great job. He's in form in this tournament. He dispatched of David Navara 2.5 to half, and I feel like sometimes I say it really didn't paint the picture. This time, I feel like it did. Hikaru was dominant on top, start to finish. And, he's done after 3 games as he deserves to be playing like that. Nepomniachtchi and Svidler, it's been even the whole way. We might even go to an Armageddon, so we'll be closely watching that matchup. And finally, Aronian will take that gift from his opponent, Maxim Matlakov, and now he can put things away with a draw. And if he puts things away, Dania, of course, he gets even closer to that first place prize fund. Of course, we've got the... overall, $1 million in total prizes and $200,000 for the champion this year, Dan.
Yeah, David Navara, he will take home $10,000, so will the losers of the other 2 matches. But $200,000 is the top prize. So it's not just $5,000 that's on the line. It is potentially $190,000. That Final 8 will be contested in the great city of Toronto, Canada. In November, early November, it's going to be epic. You are not going to want to miss it, and it is going to feature all of the greatest and brightest, nicest, most handsome faces on the Chess.com team. November 2nd through 7th will be the CGC Championship. I know a certain Canadian Grandmaster will be there. Yeah,
I've heard of him.
Photo of that.
There's actually nobody else. Nobody else lives in Toronto, and I'm easily the most famous person here, so it's absolutely my city.
No, it's
nothing else is happening here.
I can't recognize any of the other faces, particularly not that. I don't know why that guy's so big, the one in the blue shirt. Get him out of here. He should be as tiny as Lawrence Trent is in this photo.
Exactly. Yeah, no, we need more prominent feature for that guy right in the middle. That guy in the back. Clearly being modest, letting everyone else shine.
Oh my goodness. Well, the games, we have 2 games. Remember the Hikaru game. The Hikaru match is over. They will not play the 4th game. So we have Nepo Svidler and Aronian Matlakov. We saw Maxim Matlakov on camera there during the break. He is in there. We see him on camera now, fuming, upset. I do not know. It is beyond me how you push that crazy blunder away from you, especially after you survived giving Levon a chance to play Rook A6. You survive that, and then you blunder at the last hurdle. Heartbreaking.
No, it really is. This game will be... it's tough to bounce back. That's the thing. It's one thing to need a win, under the gun. You've got the white pieces at least, but it's quite another when you're still reeling, hopefully he's not, from the blunder that you just made to put yourself in this position. You shouldn't even be here in your mind.
Yeah, this should be a tie match. You've got the white pieces. That's a great situation. This changes everything. Maxime with an early A3. That is not a move I have seen in this particular position. Now, Amon, it's a very typical idea to prepare D takes C5 followed by B4. That's not atypical, but to do it here is kind of odd.
It certainly is. Like, A3 is such a modest move, but it actually has a bit of a punch to it, and I have never seen this setup ever. G3, E3, A3,
B4, knight BD2.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. But I guess the more you see of it, the more you can kind of understand at least what is being prepared here. But DC5, B4 is what Matlakov's trying to do. But B5 by Aronian has probably stunned him a little bit because he's been preparing C4.
He's been preparing C4. Now that move is impossible. So for Maxime, the general strategy of getting a non-theoretical position with a lot of pieces on the board, that's all that you can possibly ask for with the white pieces in a must-win game. But
Yeah.
with c4 impossible, does he have to resort to maybe d takes e5 and e4? Or maybe
Yep.
b4 followed by e4? Hard to say which pawn he's going to push to the 4th rank.
Yeah, but he does have to lay claim to some space. If he doesn't, I mean, he's just going to have no chances in this game. Now the choice is actually back on Levon, because if he closes things up with the move c4, all of a sudden it hands over e4 to white, which is not possible now because of the pressure.
Being on the receiving end of that. I hate it. I hate playing c4 and then e4, e5, and I feel like my center is collapsing.
That's right. No, it's really uncomfortable. I think Levon would prefer to play moves that you're highlighting, like that deal with the b pawn without playing c4, queen b6, a6, even potentially something like b4. All those moves make they make a little bit more sense than c4 to me. While c4 might be a good move, I think that he doesn't really want to commit that structure.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He plays actually c takes d4 first, and now the move a5. Of course, the pawn on b5 is no longer hanging because of the tactical knight takes d4, so Levon is more than happy to leave this pawn on pre for the time being. And the point of playing a5, I think, is prophylaxis against the solidifying move c3. Now c3 is going to encounter b4, and with a queenside exploding like that, white could end up being saddled with a serious weakness on c3. You sometimes see this in the Caro-Kann. You see this pawn structure in quite a few openings, and I think Levon is doing a great job of choosing an ultra-solid setup with no weaknesses, which is going to make it so hard for Maxime to press this to victory.
Exactly. It's hard not to play c3, so I think he will end up doing that.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, and we see the move c3. Just because b4 is intended doesn't mean that this can't be met this way. One interesting way that you could play is c takes b4. So if you want to pull up an analysis board, like c takes b4, a takes b4, a4, and then look, it's like not great, but if I can claim that I've got this pass pawn for later in the game, that's at least a permanent advantage, and I can try to play around it. Hey, this is a must-win game for Maxime, so I would always be on the lookout for permanent things that I can, save for later.
Yeah, and back we go to the live position. He's basically done the same thing on the other side. He's played AB, AB, and C4 rather than CB, AB, and A4. Right. And this also looks very sensible to me. If I had to assess the position, I would assign definitely a pull to white, even though black is incredibly solid. The bishops on E7 and D7 don't exactly make the most, I was going to say impressive impression, but they don't exactly breathe fear into Maxime Matlakov's mind here. And I think if he goes B3 and bishop B2 and maybe knight E5, maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe it is very much possible to start squeezing black in the center here. C5, though, committal, but also totally understandable, establishing a protected passed pawn. No question that white is slightly better here.
Yeah, absolutely.
No question.
The one thing about this position, as we see rook A8, is it all comes down to, can black play the move E5 eventually, or target the D pawn for white in any way? Because if that D pawn falls, moves, gets traded, anything, all of the above, the C pawn, you'll notice, is just a sitting duck. That C pawn for white needs the pawn on D4, and the pawn on D4 therefore needs all the attention, all the pampering, right? Got to hold on to that D pawn, and without it, you're dead.
This is like the pawn on C5 is like me doing labs in high school science. Like I knew how to do a good write-up, and so I'd get a good grade, but who's doing all the work, who's doing the actual experiments. It's that pawn on D4. That's what's really keeping the engine running here. Yep. And that is exactly why Maxime positions his knight on B3, a purely defensive posture. But like you're saying, it is critically important to A, defend D4, and B, make sure that you're controlling the E5 square and preventing a central breakthrough.
Yep. The other thing that the knight does really well is it covers A1. So white has ideas like bishop F4, bishop E3, and rook slides over to A1 to take over the A file. So I think it's fair to say, Dania, that Matlakov has got a good position, all things considered. He needs a win in this game at all costs. I think he set himself up reasonably well.
Yeah, but now he's got to push aside that regret that voice which tells him, hey, if I had drawn that previous game and I had this position, I would have already been on the cusp, of maybe winning a game and getting to the round of 16. Now, even if he wins, he forces an Armageddon. So all of those negative, disappointing thoughts, we all have them after a disappointing result. But so far, he's done a great job of avoiding tilt, playing objectively. You're going to have to keep that going as Levon threatens the knight on b3. The Nepo game will be starting momentarily, and once it does, we'll bring you the opening from that game as I speak. It has begun. So, Armand, with your permission, let's switch over to the Nepo game.
You have it now. Yeah.
All right. You were thinking about it. Okay. And in English by Mr. Svidler.
Who, yeah, as you mentioned, this probably did factor into his decision in the previous game to take that draw because he knew, okay, I'll be heading into the last game and I'll have the white pieces, which is always pleasant for anyone as we see the English opening, very trendy line these days. And it's actually kind of feels like a, hyper accelerated dragon, like the opposite colors.
Well, we saw Sam Sevian defeating Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in a beautiful Armageddon game precisely in this line, although I think they've already deviated from that game. You said it. This is all the rage. Everybody's playing this line now.
Yeah, d3, hitting the pawn on e4, and already there's stuff hanging, right? d4, if you're looking at the knight on d4, well, right now it's actually hanging completely. It is white's turn, but that's a serious threat.
Yep. But you can take it now anyway, and a lot of people would probably wonder why black can't just trade everything. I think it has to do with giving white the bishop pair in an open position, right? Yes, white will have an isolated pawn on d4, but giving away the dark squared bishop this early with the center being wide open, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's very committal, and Jan commits to it.
Yeah.
I think this is heading toward a draw. Come on, if I had to
very
bishop
committal,
e6.
and we see it on the board. This is exciting. I generally like what black does in these. Bishop e6, knight d7, d6. Yeah. It's really, really equal, but if I had to pick a side, I would probably take Nepo. And I guess this brings me to another point, which I'm curious what you think as well. But, this isn't like one of those matches where you play 4 games of one-time control and then maybe tie breaks in a shorter time control and then maybe a shorter time control and then Armageddon. This is 4 games straight to Armageddon. And it really feels to me like the higher rated player might not want to go into this whole Armageddon bidding process, like kind of wild decider. Do you feel like it's something that they should be considering, or are you okay with the idea that the Armageddon game, which feels like more of a coin flip than the other games, it seems like they're just walking into it?
I don't think it's possible to debate that the Armageddon produces more upsets and is more of a coin flip. Peter offering a draw with the move bishop g5, though. So I think that's totally consistent with his strategy. He wants a coin flip. He knows he's the underdog. He wants this to get into a crazy Armageddon time scramble where anything can happen. Jan is contemplating it. So from Nepo's perspective, going knight bd7 and saying, let me make a couple more moves. Let me try to decide this in an orderly fashion makes a lot of sense. And there he goes. Knight bd7, the draw offer is declined. But I'm on Pavel Pankratov. He upset Vishian on where? Armageddon. Right. Sam Sevian, where did he beat MBL? Armageddon. So Armageddon breeds uncertainty. It breeds crazy results. And I think both players are operating consistent with their strategy. Jan wants to make a push. Peter wants this to get into an Armageddon. But if I'm honest, I don't see Jan winning this game. White is just too solid. You've got the bishop pair. You're basically ready to play d5 and liquidate all of the minor pieces off the board.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out. Oftentimes, you'll see like a move, a draw offer, declined, and then maybe like another move. And then the other guy's okay, listen, that draw offer, totally, we misfired there. We actually do want to draw this game.
Yeah, I always remember a regular at my chess club in San Francisco. He was about 2100. He always had the weirdest way of offering draws. Like, he wouldn't just say, I offer a draw. He would say something like, all right, you want to call it a day? All right, let's go grab some coffee, shall we? And that would basically mean let's call it a draw. And he would do that even if he's worse. So he would try to rope people in to accepting draws.
Yeah, because it sounds more friendly. Like, oh yeah, let's grab a beer after the game. Like,
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people weren't fooled. But I think Nepo is probably seriously considering reciprocating that draw for right about now.
yeah, literally in this moment, because he sees
Yeah.
d5 coming. It could be d5 right away. It could be bishop takes knight and then pawn to d5. Point is, I don't think you can stop the move.
No. And just to give you, okay, maybe h6 is the most prudent option. Otherwise, if you get a bishop versus knight situation, then white's going to be the one declining the draw. If we bring up an analysis board, let's say black castles. You play
Right.
d5, cd, knight d5, knight d5, bishop d5. You trade everything. All of a sudden, Nepo will be asking himself, why exactly did I not take the draw here? I am worse. The bishop is better than the knight in an open board. So, it's important to be smart here for Nepo.
Indeed, he's a very talented player, but maybe sometimes not the most objective or practical, because he's just got that confidence instilled in himself. Someone offers him a draw, the immediate reaction is like, no, get that out of my face. What are you talking about? No way. You want to draw? Well, now I don't. It's like when your sibling.
Oh, and there's the draw offer.
Is it a draw offer by by Nepo?
Let's give ourselves another pat on the back. We called that entire psychological sequence. We are in their heads. They are in each other's heads, and they are now going to an Armageddon.
That was we broke that down nicely.
We did.
Go team. But yeah, that honestly is probably what was going on, and we are going to see what should be an extremely exciting Armageddon game, but not before the other match that we have ongoing, wraps itself up.
Indeed, and this one will go to Armageddon if Maxim Matlakov wins this position on demand. He's got the white pieces. He lost in a heartbreaker. If you're just joining us in the previous game, he did everything to draw a losing rook endgame, only to stumble at the very last moment when Levon had already acquiesced to a repetition of moves. So what's going on here? Maxim is trying to get knight d2. Ooh, yeah. Are you as surprised as I was expecting bishop d2 and rook a1?
Exactly, yeah. That's what I've sort of been calling for. Is bishop d2, is there a problem with bishop d2?
Yeah, is there a lose?
It looks fine to me.
I think maybe he was worried about knight e4. But knight e4 is nothing to be worried about. I mean, rook a1 and bishop e1, and if we can bring up an analysis board here, like this type of position, I think white is significantly better in.
Exactly.
f3, if you need it, you can play knight d2 later. So what the heck is
I
the
wonder,
idea?
is it
d2?
Queen a2? Is it queen a2? Like, sorry, on bishop d2.
Bishop d2, queen a2.
And it's like, you try to, I don't know, it's just like a weird position where, yeah, you can take b4, but you take b2 as well.
No, it's a puzzling move by Maxim.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's any way around it. The knight, I thought, was so well placed on b3, supporting rook a1. Yes, you want to get to the e5 square, but, I think handing black the a file like this is something he might come to regret.
Yeah, I agree completely. Knight d7 is a prophylactic measure by Aronian to stop the knight from getting to e5. Perhaps Maxim could try some shenanigans with bishop h3, and he does. This threatens the obvious bishop takes e6. And guess what? Levon's king is not the safest piece on the board. If he plays king h8, maybe the queen kind of worms its way into f4, maybe even a g-pawn march if Maxim gets desperate. And he definitely is desperate. I mean, he's in a must-win situation.
Yeah,
g4 is not out of the question here, folks. Mark my words.
g4 is maybe like a chaotic good move in a position like this. I also was looking at knight g5, just real ideas of sacrificing somewhere, particularly on f7. But as you're highlighting, there always seems to be an answer here. There's not just going to be a move you produce out of nowhere as white, and it just blindsides Levon Aronian and wins this game all of a sudden. You're down 3 minutes, and I see moves like queen c2. I see moves like rook a1 coming in. As soon as black shores up this kingside situation and the pressure on e6, look for queen c2 and rook a1, and white's just going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, black's not going to sit on this a-file forever. He's actually going to transform it into something tangible. You called it. There's that knight g5 move, trying his best to add some oil to the fire, but I think knight f8 might come very close to extinguishing that fire. The d4 pawn also becomes a serious weakness, a possibility of going b3. It has to be reckoned with. Now, the Armageddon game will start as this game is going. We will bring you that game when it begins. We will update you on what the players are bidding. They are currently in the bidding process. I'll remind you that in the Armageddon, both sides bid the time that they are willing to accept. The side with the lower bid gets the black pieces, and whatever they bid, the side that bid the higher number gets the white pieces and always gets 15 minutes. And there is no increment in Armageddon. I always remind people of this. It's a completely different game, Aman.
Yeah, I think everyone watching needs to be reminded of it. And I think there needs to be a private seminar for all the players as well so that they're reminded of this. Because it's the worst feeling when you think time should be added to your clock.
Yeah, where's my 2 seconds?
The first time you happen to notice it is always when you have 4 seconds on the clock. Like you never notice that when you have 11, 12 minutes. Nope. You'll figure that out when it's exactly. It's in this house we have our PTSD from that. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, all's well that ends well. Knight f8 by Levon trying to make sure White's attack doesn't end well. I guess we should show why knight takes f7 doesn't work on. I mean, which I actually haven't yet totally determined myself.
Yeah, I guess we should show. Yeah, Aman, why don't you show us?
Aman, yeah, you take it. Wait, he played it just as I was making the move. He literally made the move as I was making it, and I was going to say, here, White has perpetual, but does he have more than that?
And the interesting thing is, we've now outsourced our work so that
Maxime,
Levon Aronian and Maxime Matlakov, they can show us the variation.
Guys,
so pay attention. Yeah,
you asked them to do it.
Yep, guys, thank you very much. And obviously, crucial to remember is that a draw is insufficient for Maxime.
That's it, I think, Aman. I don't see a single way for... White can't create even a single mate thread. You can go rook e5, but then
H4?
Even the simple... Oh, yeah, h4. But against both moves, h6 and king h7 only leads...
That's right, yeah.
...to probably already a losing position for White. Maxime should try h4. Maxime should try h4.
Yeah, I was thinking about something like maybe if you pull up an analysis board, so like h4, I do want to play h5 and queen f5. So at least I have a threat. And if you play h6 in response, then it's like something about h5, queen f5 check, and bishop takes h6. That, you know, it gets a little muddy there with rook e6 coming. So I was thinking that's an idea, but, you know, how are you playing this position, Dania? Are you going all out and willing to lose this game? Some players just have a different perspective on that. I don't see a reason why not.
But this is an unrated game. As I've said previously, in the World Cup, which is the most high-profile knockout tournament, there's rating considerations. If you don't want to do something stupid and lose a classical game, especially if you're the underdog and you're gaining rating from a draw. Here, there's no rating on the table. You literally would rather give up your queen than make a draw. And we're going to see Maxime doing something similar. b3, trying to distract the queen from c6. Now, in the meantime, we have news on the Nepo front. Jan has bid 12 minutes. Peter Svidler has bid 11 minutes. That means that Svidler will have the black pieces and draw odds with 11 minutes on the clock. Aman, that scares me. You're 4 minutes down against Nepo to start the game. That's going to be a tough one for Peter.
Yeah, usually you're down 4 minutes to Nepo, 4 minutes into the game. But here, you know, you just start with it. So you've already got yourself in a hole, but I will say with all draws in the match, you can make a case that, look, it has been the result today, and if it continues to be that way, obviously, you'd rather have those black pieces so that Armageddon goes your way.
Yeah, and for Jan, you know he's going to put pressure on the clock. He's going to have to choose an open-ended opening. Not like a Rui Lopez that quickly fizzles out into something clearly defined. That's exactly what Svidler wants. So I'm expecting one c4 from Jan. I don't think he's going to play e4. Something tells me he's going to play what Peter Svidler just played himself in their final quick draw with the white pieces. We'll see.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So that'll be a really interesting match. I found it also of note that they bid 12 and 11 minutes. And I just think that the more savvy Armageddon bidders tend to be like 1158.
Yeah.
But these guys are 1211, whatever. Give me whatever color works out.
Round number. It's like those Jeopardy final, the final Jeopardy wagers. Like $5,676 because
Exactly.
if I answer correctly, then I'm gonna be $3 away from number 2. These players give me 11, 12 minutes. Just let's start the game. Let's get the show on the road.
Exactly. Let's get this game underway. And speaking about getting something underway, how about the attack?
Maxime needs to get his move underway, doesn't he? I don't think he sees a move.
No, I don't. Well, I don't think he sees one, and I don't think there is one. Obviously, guys, that the engine is going to be giving, equal. Like it's going to be giving 0.00 because there's a perpetual. But if you look at the scores, 2-1 beside their names there, that's not available for Maxime to choose. So he has to pick something that the engine probably will not like in order to play this game.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, there is still a possibility to blunder. Bishop d7, queen takes d5, and queen h5 mate. So that's why I was lobbying so heavily for Levant to play h6. Instead, he tries to solve his problems more directly with rook e8. And Amon, once the rooks are off the board, you're basically not risking getting checkmated. And I think this one is coming to an end pretty darn quickly.
Yep. I agree with that. Here, I don't think you want to get into bishop takes e8, queen d5. So, yeah, looks like Levant is solid here, Danya.
He is indeed. He's got plenty of time on the clock, and we will, of course, keep you posted on the result of this game. But as we get ready for the Armageddon, one more quick recap of Armageddon rules. Peter Svidler will have the black pieces. He starts with 11 minutes. Nepo starts with 15 minutes. But if the game ends in a draw, that is tantamount to victory for the side with the black pieces. That is why an Armageddon game always produces a decisive result. So if the game is drawn, black wins. The players are ready. Your seatbelts need to be firmly and tightly fastened because I have a feeling that we are in for a crazy Armageddon game. Amon, that's not always the case. Navara Adams, that was pretty damn one-sided. So we've seen all sorts of Armageddon games.
That's right. No, it could be anything, which is why we're going to make sure to tune in. And yeah, that is a beautiful call from you, buddy. That C4 move, you knew it was going to come out. And, well, there's a few things to keep in mind for this game. The time. Like, we've been talking about that the whole match. With 4 minutes less, if you think about all the games that have happened so far, Svidler would be more than flagged in most of them if you take away 4 minutes. And also, there's no increment. So, hey, it's not going up at all.
With a 2-second increment, the positions in which Nepo would offer a draw, rook and 3 versus rook and 3, he is flagging him in this situation. Now, why is Nepo doing all of this stuff with his pawns? He's trying to avoid a Grunfeld. Peter Svidler, one of the foremost experts in the Grunfeld, and so Nepo trying to get something a little bit more fresh. This is already a pretty wild position. I think it's still theory e5. What's happening?
This looks fresh enough, I will say.
Bishop b4 check. Svidler still seems to be in his preparation. Oh, queen e7.
Wow.
Defending everything at once. The queen is like Atlas holding the world on its shoulders.
Yeah, and I wonder what happens. So I'm wondering where the knight goes, and it looks like if white goes bishop e2, like just trying to break the pin, that pawn's kind of a goner after knight g4.
Bishop e2, yeah, knight g4, and if you lose this pawn, it could end up being seriously worse. I think the main drawback of black setup, Amon, is that you've played the move g6 and your bishop is nowhere near its rightful fianchetto spot. So in the long run, if you castle kingside, you're going to have to deal with the weaknesses on the dark squares.
Yeah, and what I'm looking at the move bishop d3, because I'm saying whatever black does, knight g4, d6, I'm going to castle. I don't care what it is. And if you ever take my e-pawn, I don't care what it is, I'm going to take it, I'm going to bring my rook to e1. So this is certainly an interesting decision because knight e4 jumps out at you, but then you got to look at a3.
Yeah, knight e4, a3, I think loses a piece. If we pull up an analysis board real fast here, I can show how a3, you have to keep the pin going, but after queen a5, b4, and you might say, oh, let me go knight c3, counterattack white's queen. But remember, at the end of the line, you just end up losing the knight on d1. So that's out of the question. Let's hope Svidler doesn't blunder like that. We try to stay objective as commentators, but the last thing you want, is an early blunder to decide the game.
No doubt about
Where
it.
should the knight go? G4? Or do you go back to e7 with the queen? What?
I was thinking h5, and that somehow h5 could be really annoying for a white bishop on e2 or d3, jumping in the f4 square. And if you make white spend more time developing with g3, I think that's kind of what you want. Meanwhile, the rest of your pieces are coming out. d6, knight c6. And the other thing about knight h5 is you can always jump back to g7 and get into the game on f5 or e6 if necessary.
Listen, Prex says Danya hyping up a standard line. I don't know what theory books you've been reading, but I actually am totally unfamiliar with this line. I'm sure
I've
that
never seen
there's
it.
Probably our share of MVL Aronian games from 2016, right? Nothing is unexplored territory, but I think this is sufficiently fresh to make a foremost Grunfeld expert think. So from a time perspective, it's a good choice by Nepo. Look at that move by Peter. Castles kingside.
Just cold-blooded. This move with rook e8 and after bishop e2, follow the arrows, everyone, because d3 is going to pin that bishop.
Indeed. And by the way, the Aronian game is about to end any second. Now, Levon is literally up a full piece now. Let's pan out back to that game to catch the final 2 or 3 moves. I think Matlakov is going to resign any second now. And then
that,
switch
of
back
course,
to the Armageddon.
will be the end of things. And when you said it was a full piece, you weren't kidding.
No, literally, yeah.
Unfortunately, this is done. There's nothing you can do here as white. I mean, at this point, I'm not even sure that I would offer a draw as black just to win the match,
That would be very generous.
Yeah.
Although repeating moves could be a signal that I don't think Matlakov is going to decline a repetition here. No, but Levon is going for the win. Queen e1.
Yeah.
Not sure why he's not resigning.
Right.
I mean, you don't have winning chances in this position. He's going to resign after that move. There it is.
For sure.
We congratulate Levon Aronian, who wins that clutch third game, and we switch back immediately to our Armageddon game.
Can't miss any action here, and the knight did go to h5. Okay, I kind of like the knight there. I think this knight f4 thing is annoying, but white might want to deal with it with saying, okay, rook e1, and as long as the knight doesn't get there before my rook gets to e1, I always have bishop f1 to drop back to. I'm also looking at the pawns, and I know we're not focused on it, but let's just remember to keep count because black does have all their pawns.
Yeah, and white has only 7, and white cannot afford just to drop the e5 pawn, right? You can't just say, I don't really need that pawn either. I actually think that the battle is going to revolve largely around this e5 pawn. Can black win it? Can black at the very least get it off the board before white's got a queen on h6 and a knight on g5?
That's right. Yeah, it's a really dangerous idea. The thing that I like about black's position is the move rook e8 and queen f8 could happen in one move, which was maybe a useful square. So I don't know. I would have started with rook e8. Do you think that he was concerned about c5?
I think he was concerned about c5 because it doesn't threaten anything directly, but it keeps the queen jailed, locked out of the king side. And I think Peter trying to take a more cautious route. I'm curious what he's planning against rook e1. I think it's just d6. I think he wants to liquidate the center, and that position's going to be a heck of a lot easier to play, even if he's lost his objective edge.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. The move c5 is just one of the moves you don't want to deal with. You'd rather be on the other side of that pawn, and they have those expressions, the threat's stronger than the execution. I've always enjoyed the quote, the move doesn't threaten anything, but it threatens to threaten.
Right, and it's a second-order threat.
Yeah, there's nothing more dangerous than being threatened.
No, that's actually threats being threatened are it's some of the it's just one of the great concepts in chess. Just the idea that complexity exists in layers. Okay, we actually have d6 on the board. There's a trade, and Nepo now has to focus on winning this pawn back ASAP and getting a playable position. Right, you can't just trade all of the pieces. Svidler still has 7.5 minutes on the clock.
That's a lot.
He's done a great job so far.
Yeah, and the time difference is actually right on the money, 4 minutes. So the time difference being maintained, which is usually a good sign for Nepo. Like I think you're happy in general when you're playing Armageddon if you're still up that 4 minutes, but
Listen.
both of you have way less time, yeah, mission success.
You want to maintain it up to 4 minutes to 0.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So Nepo's happy with this. Now, the big question, Amon, I don't think he's going to take on c6 just yet, because after queen takes c6, you've given up your biggest asset, and you might not even win the pawn back because c4 is going to be hanging.
And then the question is, what do you do? Because look, you can talk about how good the position of the clock, whatever. I think Svidler has just acquitted himself really well. I think he's got a great opening for an Armageddon game. I think it's been fantastic so far. Svidler should be very, very happy with how this match has gone.
Not to raise the alarm bells for Nepo fans too quickly, but with the center being wide open, I always draw attention to that, Amon, because when the center is open, there's a high probability of trades, right? Just by definition. So Nepo has to tread very carefully to make sure that he's actually keeping pieces on the board. As I said earlier, I was thinking maybe you should start with c5, but if you do, no problemo. The queen just swings over to f6, and the light squared bishop has plenty of prospects. You can see why Nepo is taking a chunk of time here.
Indeed, it's not about maintaining the time edge. He needs to find something that actually makes this playable. And I love the comments that are being brought up on screen. It's like, Svidler playing so well, and it's like he just doesn't care about my fantasy bracket at all.
Nope.
No,
he does. He wants to bust it.
Yeah, he wants to bust it, and just reminds us that everyone was betting on Jan Nepomniachtchi in fantasy, right?
This was like a 98% community pick. Now, bishop d5, I wanted to point out the knight can drop back, but why didn't it move to f4? I thought knight f4 was just like bad for white. Svidler, same idea, but a different move?
Totally agree. Knight f4 versus f6 seems like a no-brainer to me.
If knight takes d5, what is Nepo cooking up here? Is it knight b5? No.
Okay, here it's going to be queen takes, and at least we can understand there's a nice cheapo that maybe you could throw on the board for us here. Knight takes d5, pawn takes.
Board, please.
Queen takes, and nice little puzzle rush moment for everybody.
But Svidler, he takes on d5.
Yeah.
He's not going to play queen takes d5,
No,
though the live position is this one.
Indeed.
By the way, just really, really quickly, if he had gone c6, Nepo prepared c5, dislodging the queen and taking the knight. So Svidler navigating the minefield, 6.5 minutes on the clock. How does he try to get to this pawn? Does he play c6? Does he play bishop e6? Bishop e6 might be a takeout move.
Bishop e6. Yeah.
He might do that.
That's a good point.
But
Is he going to swing like queen h4, knight g5?
I thought about that.
Could get a little dangerous.
It could get dicey, that rook coming to d1. I don't like Svidler's decision to drop the knight back to f6 after knight f4. I think he was solidly better. Now you get the sense that Nepo suddenly has brought his pieces out from the dead Svidler with 5.5 minutes as we're speaking. The next 3 or 4 moves are going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's a great point. This pawn on d5, bishop e6. I mean, Nepo has surely seen this. We see that time advantage. It is still exactly 4 minutes. So definitely, I think Nepo can't be unhappy with how that's going. The position, though, is starting to liquidate. It's progressing. Bishop e6 is a really, really key move using the pin, and he's basically picking up that d pawn. So what does Nepo have in exchange? Because he's losing the pawn.
Is it fair to say, Amon, that d takes e6 is what Nepo would have played in a classical game, but it's out of the question here because drawing that rook endgame is way too easy? Am I correct in saying that? Yeah. So
that is
queen h,
completely
what does that
unplayable.
leave? Queen h4 and knight g5 is really the only way to create kingside activity. But let's forecast these moves really, really quickly. If queen h4, bishop d5, knight g5, h5, a lot of people here would be tempted by this move, Amon, but after queen f4, white can basically resign. You don't just checkmate the black king that easily.
No. Chess is a fair game, and any checkmate attack is usually prepared. It's worked for. So what is going on after bishop e6? So if it's not queen h4, do we have other ideas than queen h4? Because queen to h4 looks like speculation to me, and maybe a last-ditch move.
What about rook a d1? No, still bishop takes d5.
Yeah.
And c6. Queen h4 is on the board. Let's swing back to the live position.
Yep.
Queen h4 has been played, and Svidler immediately takes on d5. This is Nepo's idea. He starts with rook a1.
Right. Do you just shore things up and play c6 here? Just like
knight g5, knight d4,
and
knight f6.
The interesting thing about a position, let's say like that, is sometimes this might be, again, the way to play in a different situation. But if the best you're doing is like winning a pawn back or something, that's not enough.
I know it sounds crazy, but even the move f6 is in play here. I think stopping this knight g5, knight e4, knight f6 maneuver. I agree that the point of putting the knight on f6 is not to take on d5. But maybe you can create some tactical chances based on that. Maybe then swing the queen back to d4. f6 is on the board. Great move by Peter.
Yeah, I think that's a really classy move, because to do f6 really shows that he appreciates the danger of knight g5, even the practical danger. To find time for this move right now after rook d1, when the bishop's a little bit loose, I think that's it's a really, really key move for Svidler. And his next move is c6, Danya.
Yeah.
Once he plays c6, rook e8, he's king g7. It's unbreakable, this position looks like. So then it comes down to the time.
Yeah. At this point, the evaluation is not in question. I mean, this is much better for black. No compensation, zero compensation for the pawn, and a monster bishop on d5. Oh, my land. Something's in the air, ladies and gentlemen, and Nepo has to find a way to milk every second off Svidler's clock. That is his best chance right now. I don't think we're disputing that.
Yep, h3. At some point, I think that move has to be played. So I don't mind the move h3. The other thing that it does, maybe not the main idea, but I like it, knight h2, knight g4. Using the dark squares after f6, that's definitely where you want to be, I think.
Mondo, Peter taking 30 seconds on a move like c6. I feel like he's got to cut that thinking time down. If Nepo can get him below 3 minutes, that's when you start getting really concerned. c6 is on the board, and you are on a roll. Knight h2, trying to induce h5, which would create a weakness on g6. It's on the board.
Yeah, h5.
Nepo's so tricky.
Yep. I think he's doing things well. The knight on e3 is fantastic.
Yes. Man, if you had to predict a result right now, do you think Svidler pulls it out?
I'm going to say I think the time pressure decides it, and Nepo just somehow. I
feel like it all depends on whether Nepo can keep the queens on the board. So far, he's been doing a phenomenal job of it. I agree. I'm on Svidler. He's just dipping on the clock. He's down to 3.5 minutes. This is an Armageddon game. Svidler wins the match with a draw.
Yep.
But can he stay afloat on the clock and avoid a blunder?
He's really playing so well, and he hasn't even, at this point, the reason that the engine is creeping closer to the middle of the board, 0.00, is because you might lose that d pawn. Knight takes d5 and whatever. But we have to remember that's not an option for white to take. So don't think that Svidler is necessarily blundering away, right?
That's such a good explanation.
This is him playing really well, actually.
Yeah, because he's got all the leverage in the position. A draw is tantamount to a loss. So take the eval with a grain of salt. Unless the eval goes in white's favor, Svidler's doing fine. b5, an excellent move by Jan. Can black take on b5? Can you get away with that?
That's a great question that I'm happy not to answer.
Oh, my lands. There's a crazy line there I'm trying to calculate. I won't make the moves on the board because Svidler is too low on the clock. Let's stick to the current game. The decision here is between c5 and cb, in my opinion.
Indeed. And I feel like if you're between those two moves, you should probably take.
Yep. And you should do it fast. 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes. Aman, it's still 4 minutes. That's been the time difference.
I think he can do it. I think he can play c takes p5, and knight takes bishop complications seem like they are okay for black.
Oh, queen e5. What a nerves of steel move by Peter. But
nerves
now
of steel
queen
move,
is in trouble.
Yeah, look how easy it is to play queen a4, though. a7 is loose. b6 is dropping.
No, this is looking bad. Bishop f7, though, holding on for dear life.
Svidler needs to liquidate. It's not enough to
Yep.
just, hey, you play move, I play move. Things need to disappear from the chessboard.
But he's not doing it, and now he's down to 2 minutes. Amon, even if you can consider a rook, knight, and 3 against rook, bishop, and 3, he's going to flag Peter.
Exactly.
If Peter has anything below 2 minutes on the clock, let's be realistic.
Yep. 6 minutes
Man.
to 2, and we talked about that 4 minutes. It's kind of happening that it's going to be like 4-0 soon.
This is honestly so impressive by Jan. So few people, Amon. He's making it look easy, keeping pieces on the board. He was down a pawn with worst placed pieces. The h3 knight h2 idea was amazing, and on the strength of that, he's gotten Peter down to 1:45.
Mm-hmm.
This one is going down the toilet, I think, for P. Svidi.
It definitely looks like it. We need moves. They need to be
You gotta
quicker,
move.
more
Rook
decisive.
E8, Rook F8, something.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter what move he produces here. It's too slow. Because
And
it's been 45 seconds.
No,
he
Peter, and
only
you can
has a
sense
minute and
it.
a half.
No, but he knows there's no increment, but this is bad. Unless he finds Amon some way
Right.
to mount a drawing counterattack against White's king, but that seems so unlikely. Nepo can keep himself relatively safe, especially with that knight on e3, the hero of the game.
It really is a super strong piece, and it looks way
Queen
too
A2.
difficult. Queen A2. Interestingly, that
Nepo
move can
missed
be
that?
played. I think he did. Yeah, that's not a Nepo face
it.
of like, okay, yeah, in stride, part of the calculation. Definitely did miss that. I'm
Queen
not
takes
sure it
B6,
makes a
though.
big difference. The king is so safe on H2.
And the king is so unsafe on g7. You basically need the queen to stay in contact with the bishop to avoid shenanigans of the queen e6 variety, which
Yeah.
means that Svidler just doesn't have the leverage to like force anything against White's king. Queen takes b6, rook takes f2 is not out of the question, by the way. Queen c7.
Wow. Is that just a safety first kind of move?
Oh, what a move! Amon, rook takes f2. Now, rook takes f7 is terrible because that leads to a draw. Black has 3 pawns for the knight there.
Yeah, that's very interesting, actually. Super tricky. Knight f5, though, and you start to get a little nervous here as black.
1 minute and 5 seconds. Still a 4-minute time difference.
What a move, rook e2.
E2.
Not concerned at all. The queen on a2. Look at the geometry. The rook, the bishop, everything.
Knight f5, you go king h7. That queen, it was a hero when it was on e7 in the opening. It's a hero now. Can Jan continue to complicate the game? He's down 2 pawns at this point, and the b pawn is ready to move forward. Ooh.
Interesting decision. I don't hate it, but I think it's objectively wrong. And I think the reason... Well, look, there's a reason he did that. Peter is saying, I want an easy position to play. I want to play b4. I want to play b3. I want to have it protected. And I want to pre-move to my draw.
And people should not look at the evil hour. This is 100% understandable decision. This might be a very good decision. You know what hurts Jan here is the fact that his king is now permanently unsafe. There's always a check here. There's always a check here. So that circumscribes the power of the white queen to create threats. And that's why Nepo keeps it on this diagonal.
Okay, but here is what
Queen
the issue
F1.
I have. Here's the issue I have with this idea from Svidler. Yes, you've got this, but you don't have any threats. You can't do anything actively, and won't your time just disappear slowly?
Well, but queen e5 check would have forced a trade of queens, leaving black with 2 pawns for the exchange. I thought Peter should have considered that.
Yeah,
With
Rook
every
B5
ticking
says
second,
he
no
agrees.
longer.
He agrees with you.
That was bad. That was a missed opportunity there for Peter to make this even easier to play.
Okay, moves like bishop c4, they seem weird to me. Why not leave the bishop on f7 and go king g7,
King g7, king g6.
King g7, exactly. You have to commit because I think you're trying to do too much as black here.
Back to f7. See, 4 seconds right there. He's spending 5, 6.
gotta
Every
go back.
ticking second is golden here. And Peter's way too slow. What is he
And
doing?
this is the thing. I think that he might be considering king e4. I swear, I think he's considering king e4. And he's if you
he
go
probably
back, then,
was.
yeah, you can't be falling into this. There's no queen e5, so tricky.
Well, queen e5, here's the thing. Queen e5 is now a huge threat. If Peter can get the queens off the board in this version, then the position becomes easier to pre-move. King f4. This is an attempt to force the draw with queen g3, a huge threat.
You can check on c7. Queen e5, queen takes c4, check.
No,
and
but
then king e3, and is there a draw there? Because it's
oh
check?
my god, queen a1, but queen f1.
Holy smokes.
But Aman, after queen c7, king f5, the problem that Jan is butting up against right now is how do you stop the queen trade with black's king close enough to basically promote the pawn? This is going to be a flag fest. I have a feeling that Svidler is going to like have a queen on the board.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a wild ride to finish this game.
Yep. Oh my goodness. This is, honestly, I would say somebody a little bit faster than Svidler, more savvy. I would probably say, like, I even favor his chances with the black pieces
totally.
here.
22 seconds. It's an eternity.
Svidler, legend in his own right, needs to show us that mouse speed, and can he keep up?
King e2 was the move. Oh, he went the wrong way. King e2 would have
bishop
avoided
d3.
all the checks.
Bishop d3, though.
King c1, king c2. The bishop and the queen shelter the black king from the lateral checks by the rook.
But the problem is, you're sheltered, but what else? That's it, right? You're just sitting there.
You're sitting there with queen e5, a huge threat.
King h1. Yes, king h1. That's the move, I think. Rook a6. So tricky.
Mate on a1 is threatened. Oh, Svidler's a hero for defending this, but he's down to 13 seconds. Aman, he's not pulling this out.
Queen f1. You can just, like, you kind of shuffle, like, try everything.
Svidler has that smile. He knows exactly what's about to happen. He's down to 10 seconds.
Yep.
This is over. A heartbreaker for Mr. Svidler.
And
unless he takes on h3.
Yeah, you guys can see if queen h3, queen takes g2, that's his idea. But I think everyone knows, even though the eval bar is 0.00, it's just not going to happen.
There's a mate in one threat. It doesn't matter. It is a moot point. And Jan Nepomniachtchi pulls it out. Oh my goodness. One more minute on Peter's clock. This would have been a draw.
And Peter didn't make any blunders. Notice how that eval bar never, ever went past halfway. He played so well.
He played an unbelievable match against Jan. All throughout, he was on equal terms. He was drawing from a position of strength, especially with the black pieces. And in the Armageddon, he outplayed Jan Nepomniachtchi. The exchange sack was an incredible practical decision, I think we can say in retrospect. But I'm on 5 seconds here, 10 seconds there, a slightly more accurate move here. And we might be talking about perhaps the biggest upset of the CGC. And instead, Jan Nepomniachtchi pulls through once again. There was a moment where he could have actually gone, and maybe this is a moot point, but I think king e2 would have led to a winning position. White has no checks.
Yeah, it's a really strange concept, but there's just nothing that white can do in that position. Everything's defended. E6 checks covered. F6 pawns defended. The queen, no checks from g1. It's like, then black can really start playing maybe the move b2 soon.
Yeah, I mean, b2, queen g3.
Yeah,
probably
queen g3, queen e1.
Probably queen b1 by Jan keeps the pieces on the board. Maybe he still would have won, but no, queen g3 and queen e1, as you're saying.
Exactly, yeah.
My God.
That threat is actually deciding.
That would have won on the spot. Svidler would have won this game if he won king e2. Instead,
that's amazing,
king d2 gives the queen real estate and gives it a chance to check on f2. That is how close he came to knocking out Nepo in the Armageddon. Holy smokes,
I don't know how much of a discussion we want this to be, but king e2, maybe the rook wants to go down to like e7 so that you're threatening rook e7 check after queen e1. Mm-hmm. That's like how you want to be tricky in a situation like this, right? If you're Nepo, and knowing Nepo, not a doubt in my mind, he would play this move.
He will find every little way to keep
annoying.
Pieces on the board. But queen e3 here, at the very least, I think basically forces a queen trade.
Exactly, because then you'll be able to go queen g3, queen e1. So, wow, as we're breaking it down, guys, I think what we're deducing here is king e2 with 30 seconds. I think he was about 25, 27 seconds on the clock, Dania. That would have been enough, I think, for Svidler to put it away. So, unbelievable. I mean, the chances that he had there to draw this game and win the match, it was such a close fight.
It was an incredible match. Ladies and gentlemen, the matches conclude as we review the scores one final time here. Hikaru Nakamura, a smooth victory over David Navara, all smooth sailing. Levon Aronian wins a critical equal drawn endgame in Game 3 and finishes it off with a victory in Game 4. And Jan Nepomniachtchi pulls through in the Armageddon in the most improbable of fashions to knock off Peter Svidler. We will have Mr. Nepo in the studio to share his thoughts on this roller coaster topsy-turvy match. So go absolutely nowhere. We'll have more CGC coverage and a wrap-up for you on the other side of this short break. Championship, and we are very pleased to be joined by none other than Jan Nepomniachtchi, the winner of a scintillating match against Peter Svidler. Jan, thanks for joining us. Let's start with the Armageddon game. What are your thoughts on that game overall, and at what point did you sort of realize that the clock was going to be your most important weapon?
Yeah, the clock would be my only ally in. Yeah, only chance. Well, to begin with, I should say that I was very, very naive setting the time. Asking for the time like 7 p.m. Because I'm still badly jet lagged after St. Louis, and normally I sleep at this time. So, I just I was really struggling. And going to the Armageddon game, I think there is nothing to be proud of. So when I got this set up, like with an extra exchange, somehow I thought, okay, maybe there is a way to flag Peter somehow. But then he started to run with his king, and this was just shocking. I had no idea what should I do. King is getting closer and closer, and there is
Yeah, with the king getting closer,
it was
definitely
a very nice idea from him. Yeah, because if I would trade queen somehow, probably it would be quite an easy task to flag him in case if I would decide to do this.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned the time that it is for you right now, Jan. I was going to ask you about game number 4. There's this interesting moment we saw, like a draw offer, and then maybe you declined it, and then the next move you offered one. Were you content with playing a bit of a shorter match in that sense and just getting to the Armageddon because of the time, and also what went into declining the draw and then offering it on the next move?
I don't know. For a second, I think that I will be able to maintain blockade on d5. But after he castled, I quickly got that probably he's just more than in time, to play d5 and remove all the pieces from the board. So maybe I'm the one who should be precise. So there is, I was slightly worried if at this moment he would reject the draw, but
Jan, you've obviously played Peter a million times. You've played the young players from your generation in Russia and beyond. Do you think there is something stylistically different between the way that Peter plays, for example, and the way that the players of the younger generation of Dusatorov, Gukesh, and all of those other players play? Is there something appreciably different in their playing styles, in your experience?
It's hard to say. First of all, Peter is an artist. He's like, for him, chess is an art, and when it's when it's going, when it's going nice, when it's going fancy, he becomes extremely strong, because he, he really enjoys it. He likes the process, he likes the game, he likes it, quite a bit, and probably not the worst idea to play some boring chess against him. Yeah, so. He can jump around with his pieces, and he can't really trick you or something. So stylistically, he's very, very special. I would say he's quite a unique player. So I really struggle to recall anyone like him. Okay, maybe I am in some way. Yeah, when I get some nice position, I'm really I'm getting excited. Yeah, and I really want to play it well, but. This is still far from from his style.
Yeah, and you're also moving on in the competition. Whether or not you continue is what we're all excited to find out. But how has your experience been playing these matches so far? Are they getting more intense as we slowly get closer and closer to Toronto?
Well, both my matches were intense. So the first match was, I think, in St. Louis, and it was like 8 a.m. Or something. So I'm not quite used to playing that early, and yeah, this match was also something special because of schedule and jet lag. So yeah, it's very intense. Like that doesn't really matter what the time is. I mean, it's really intense, and I'd say Petr just outplayed me in most of the games. I only had some small chances in the first game. I think I could play g5 instead of knight f3, and g5 was nearly winning. But besides that, yeah, I mean, I always was like trying to fight for my life. Yeah, so the matches are, really, really tough, and probably closer to Toronto. Yeah, it's getting more and more difficult.
Is there somebody that you prefer to face between Arjun and Timur?
I would probably, if both gets, if both of them, they will get, disqualified. So I just, just get a free slot. Yeah, I mean, if it really works. So that's my main, my main hope. But yeah, I guess they're all both like brilliant players, and I think I don't know what did Arjun do today in the Champions Chess Tour. I'll just check this out later. And okay, Timur is known to be one of the like best GMs of of his generation. Yeah, and also did quite well in Madrid. So probably it's more about me if I'll be able to to sleep more or less normally closer to this match. So I have maybe one more week or something.
Yeah, exactly. Another week.
Right.
And Dania, I think I'm out of questions myself, and obviously it's late for Jan after a long match, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, I think we will let you go, Jan. There's let's see if we have like maybe one chat, if we could keep you for maybe one more chat question. We'll see if there are any good questions from the chat, and then we will let you take your well-deserved rest. There's a question. How nervous were you toward the end, or did you feel comfortable with the time advantage? Were you certain of the result?
Very nervous.
Or at what point were you certain of the result?
Maybe when he somehow ran with his king to the corner, and I found this queen f1, queen e1 trick, and he really got low on time. And at this point, I think it was already practically quite difficult for him to fight, because okay, it was like 8 seconds or something, and clearly the position requires some, I don't know, some sequence of moves. Yeah, so once it was like queen on king on mid2 and bishop on c2, I thought, okay, maybe now I'm going to flag him, like sooner or later, or maybe deliver a mate in one. So hopes.
That's very insightful, Jan. We will let you rest. Good luck against the winner of Arjun against Timur. Thank you so much for joining us for an interview, and congratulations on a great match.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congrats, Jan.
Okay, that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. There are the final scores. Aman, it was a tale of 3 matches that really had their own storyline, their own narrative, and that's honestly what I love about the CGC, the fact that like you can spin a storyline out of each individual match.
Yeah, indeed. There's a storyline there. There's other storylines that evolve and come to fruition as players advance. And after today's results, Hikaru Nakamura advances, and Jan Nepomniachtchi, we just spoke to, advances as well over Peter Svidler in Group E. And finally, in Group H, we have Levon Aronian advancing as well. So, Daniel, actually, all the favorites that people expected to win, in the end, got there and did advance one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, one way or another, by hook or by crook, by time or by crime. And as we look at the overall bracket of 64, there have been a lot of upsets. There have been a lot of players who have blasted and destroyed basically every bracket in the book. I'm thinking Pavel Pankratov, the guy is a machine. He played yet another impressive match today against Norbert Abdusattorov, beating some amateur named Vishy Anand before. He will be facing Anish Giri. That's on the right side of your screen. Rajaba Varigaisi will be played next week. Nihal Sarin defeating Vladimir Kramnik. we've also had players that have been incredibly smooth. I'm Wesley So, Lanier Dominguez. They have been forces to be reckoned with, and the results of their matches have never been in question. So, Aman, before I say the final words, I'll pass it back to you one more time. Your thoughts on today overall and on the CGC thus far?
Yeah, I mean, today's matches were really exciting. I think we got a little bit of everything because we had a match that started off as one that maybe we were kind of not batting an eye to, this Levon Aronian and Maxime Matlakov match. And all of a sudden, it exploded with one of the biggest blunders that we've seen today. You know, and I'll never cheer for blunders in chess, but I have to admit, as a commentator and as a fan, it does make it pretty exciting. That was the biggest blunder we had today. Then, of course, we had a neck-and-neck match where Svidler was playing out of his mind. I thought that was a really classy nod that Nepo gave him in the interview as well, just calling him an artist and how, you know, when things flow and work well, that's when Svidler is at the top of his game, and the top of his game can be above so many players in the chess world. And finally, we had Hikaru Nakamura with a one-sided victory where it looked like he could have easily won all 3 games, finished 2.5 to half. So like I said, Dania, it was so nice to get a little bit of everything today, and it's been a pleasure bringing everyone the commentary alongside yourself.
Likewise, Aman, always a pleasure to commentate with you. And as the day wraps up, there will be more CGC action to come. Arjun Erigaisi will take on Timur Rajabov next week. Stay tuned for the specific time. And the CGC, the wheels continue to turn. We continue to get closer and closer to start of November in Toronto, where only 8 players will book their tickets, and only one of them will take home the $200,000 purse. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to everybody in the chat. Chat was hopping today. It always is. It really breathes so much magic into this magical event. Thank you to our producer, Hala, and everybody on our amazing Chess.com team. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have a lovely rest of your Saturday and a great rest of your weekend from the Chess.com Global Championship. GM Daniel Naroditsky, GM Aman Hambleton bidding you goodbye and a great rest of your weekend.